All those in favor of the motion? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Amy, would you like to join us at the table? Oh, do you mind if, since Tom is here, do you mind if I just ask him up to have a question? You can sit down too. Tom, do you want to pop up for a minute?
Tom is co-chair of the capital
Yeah.
committee.
Makes it totally appropriate for both of you to come up.
Oh, yeah, I have two. I'm looking for it.
I mean, it was a quorum of the committee.
Almost.
I'm going to heckle.
Yeah.
Good thing we have 9.
Yeah.
He's got one of the nice ones.
Tom, one of the Board of Selectmen sponsored articles concerns a stabilization fund for roadway
Yes.
funds. And I was wondering if you could just address that and catch us up on any discussions that the Board of Selectmen has had.
We haven't had a ton of discussion on it, other than last night we talked about the priority list on the contingent budget, because as you know, the roadway special stabilization fund is not funded under the non-contingent budget, and we were requesting that it be funded with the contingent budget for some amount. Last night, as we kind of went through our priority list, I think we've only got about 100. We've got 100,000, is it, in the funding of the stabilization fund. So basically, the way that would work, we're not sure. We're still trying to vet it out with town council in terms of, does it have to be separated from everything else? I think it does in terms of its own article, and you'd fund it with, non-contingent zero and whatever the warrant committee decides that is appropriate on the contingent budget. It's very possible that, because that is a special purpose stabilization fund and the override money would be dedicated to it, that may be a separate vote of the town. So there may be 2 questions on the ballot. I'm not positive of that, but because the voters would have to vote that separate from.
Because it's essentially its own override, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
To fund a special purpose stabilization fund?
Right. Now, it may be 2 questions within the same,
Okay.
2 sub-questions within the same question, but, so that's what we're not sure about at this point.
Okay.
The mechanics of that.
So where does the funding come into play in the article or the recommendation itself? It doesn't. Are you waiting to hear back on town council about that as well?
Well, it's, yeah, the articles, I haven't looked at the article, but does the
I've got it
article
on
say
the
to see what sum? Vote authorized.
It says a portion of the town's operating budget and to expend money. It doesn't say.
Yeah, so it would be the recommendation that would actually fund, A, recommend to approve the stabilization fund, and B, recommend to fund it.
The warrant committee's recommendation.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so then we probably can't vote on this until we're a little further into our contingent budget discussions then. And
Probably, yes.
is there a way, I've not seen this as an example, but I guess I would have to write a draft for the warrant committee to consider that had 2 scenarios in it. One was a non-contingent with funding of 0 and a contingent with funding of X dollars. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Similar to the way all of your budget articles are going to go, there's going to be a table.
Yeah.
And the table's going to be, there's going to be a contingent table and a non-contingent table.
Yeah.
And town meeting would vote, actually both of them. So first they vote the non-contingent, then.
And then would this article become a permanent fixture in the warrant?
Once voted, the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund comes under the control of the Board of Selectmen. So the town meeting is authorizing the expenditure for a special purpose from that fund. The townspeople are voting to fund it with override dollars.
Yep.
But once funded, the Board of Selectmen control it in the sense that every year they will have to say, we are going to continue the stabilization fund at the same amount, which then would increase by 2.5%, because it's subject to Prop 2.5. Or the selectmen can say, there's no longer as big a need, and reduce the funding going into the stabilization fund. If they vote to reduce it, then that becomes the new ceiling.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we had 100,000 and 3 years from now, we say, well, we only need 75, then you can't push it back up to the 100.
Okay, so your understanding and explanation there then is that in the recommendation of the warrant committee, we don't need to say anything about the appropriation comes every year. We're just authorizing it for fiscal year 18.
That's right, yes.
Okay, and then once it's established, the Board of Selectmen take it on.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, do other people have questions about this roadway special stabilization fund, special purpose stabilization fund?
No, I was gonna ask if you beat me to it.
Oh.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, cool. Why don't we move back to the Capital
Sit up
Improvement
here,
Planning
Linda.
Committee
Capital.
budget then?
Might as well.
Welcome, Amy. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Excellent, thanks. Can you send me a revised one-time monies spreadsheet that has these these one-time items listed on it? You made me a free cash, or you have
Yeah.
your own anyway.
Well, the only one I have is, it ties into the balancing of the non-contingent and contingent budget, so if I
Okay.
add these on it,
All right.
I have to add this
Okay.
on that line item for
Yeah.
the capital article, which I can do, or I can just create a separate, I'll just create a separate list. I have this in Excel
That's helpful.
anyways,
If you just
so-
want to give it to me in Excel, I can make it myself. It's just that there were some of these things already on the one-time
Yes.
list, and now they're here, and so they're kind of, and then there's other things here
Right.
that aren't on that one-time list that we started, so
Right.
I kind of have to scrap that old list and start over, I think.
Okay.
All right, so thanks for coming tonight. Want to talk about the Capital Improvement Planning Committee request?
You want me to just do my little
Do your thing.
spiel? Okay. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee has approved the recommendation that I'm presenting tonight. The total capital recommendation is $4,707,119. Of that amount, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee recommends that $3,197.69 be considered recommended bonded capital items, and $1,510,050 be considered recommended non-bonded capital items. Of that $1,510,050, they're recommending that $760,050 be appropriated from funds certified as free cash by the Department of Revenue, and an additional $750,000 be appropriated from the Capital Stabilization Fund, with the intent that that fund will be replenished through the savings and the rebates received on that LED. It relates to LED, lighting project, which in the first year alone, once it's fully up and operational, is estimated to take in a rebate of somewhere around $200,000, and then going forward on an annual basis, a savings of $100,000 to $125,000. So the Capital Committee feels that we could replenish those funds within a short period of time if at future town meetings, we make a commitment to direct those savings to the Capital Stabilization Fund.
I think that's a great idea. I think it frees up money for us now to
Yes.
do a great project, and it uses a stabilization fund that we wouldn't otherwise be using for something. And
Right.
I don't know which one of you had the idea, but Steve discussed it with me a while ago, and I
So-
think
It was Steve's idea
It was
primarily.
Steve's
I'll give Steve the
idea,
credit.
and Mr. Dennehy's idea to, he, as soon as he, very early in him coming here, put forth the idea of adding that to the capital plan, and had the idea of, well, why aren't we doing this? This could really be a good program for the town, and it was Steve McGurty's idea too. This is a perfect example of when we should use the Capital Stabilization Fund, because up until this point, we really haven't taken any money out of there except for when we put bond premiums in and deliberately took them out to
Right.
fund debt service. So this is a great example of when you should consider.
Yep.
And I think as far as Standard & Poor's and the rating agencies go, as long as the town has a plan to replenish it, they do look at the capital stabilization funds differently than the general stabilization. General stabilization is the rainy day fund, right? You don't put in just to take out the next year, you try to build up the reserves, whereas the capital stabilization, you're putting aside for
Capital projects.
hopefully a project like this comes along and you're like, well, how would we fund that? Perfect example of a way to do it.
Great. And so, thumbs up for the creativity. I don't know that we've done it before, though, so I'm concerned about just any unintended consequences. Have there been
So-
discussions with town council or anybody else about how we make the
Yes.
mechanics work in the
Yeah.
warrant, et cetera?
So there were some discussions, a concern was brought up of, does this need to be a separate article from the capital article? It does not. In the recommendation, you can do funded, the town treasurer is authorized to issue bonds, accept grants, an appropriation from free cash, and then say an appropriation from the capital stabilization fund. We did talk to town council about that, and he confirmed that you could handle it either way, separate article or here. There were some discussions of paying back interest. That was a big no. You just replenish it when you can replenish it. You don't put any kind of loan agreement
Okay.
into place.
But you can over-replenish it.
You can over replenish. You can
So
put
you can
whatever you
effectively add
want,
interest
right,
back to it.
in there. And this article, because there's a bonding authorization, already requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. If there were no bonding authorization, this would trigger the 2/3 vote. So that was an initial concern, but this article is already subject to the 2/3. And then even if you had it in a separate article, it's still going to bring up the same conversation and the same questions at town meeting. So I don't see any problem with having it in the regular capital article. I'm not sure if the Board of Selectmen have a difference of opinion on that. I mean, I think it makes sense, and I think it does show out-of-the-box thinking of, you don't want to pass up an opportunity for future savings, and how can we fund this to get it done now, so that we can get it in place and start realizing those savings. And I know this committee has had those same conversations. If a project comes across the table that are going to improve efficiencies or result in cost savings, we should talk about it and try to find a way to do those types of things. So this is a good example of that.
Phil, you had something?
Well, just the numbers you gave, Amy, made it sound like it's like a 6-year payback. Wasn't it? You said 200 the first year?
Well,
No,
there'd
no,
be
that's just the
200,
rebates.
right, 220 in
And then
rebates,
100
$125,000 a
So
year.
even if it was just the rebates, you'd be paying essentially for the cost of it in 6 years.
Probably even less than
It's
6
less.
years.
Probably less.
Yeah,
it's a-
yeah.
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 Yeah, because that was just based on the projected energy savings, but there's also a savings or projected savings that these fixtures last significantly longer, so you replace about 5% of them a year rather than, I think it was like 16% of them, I think I
Right.
said.
Right,
So-
so it has the benefit
And they're
of
less
freeing up labor as
expensive.
well.
Yeah.
So it'll come back to you.
Yes, John?
How do we, so just in future budgets, we redirect?
You just footnote to hit the DPW energy and the DPW streetlight budget for,
X to go,
X.
to go into
Right.
the capital,
Right.
okay.
So in the comments, I think, I don't think you can
Right.
commit a
You can't
future
commit, but
warrant
here's
committee
our
or a future
intent.
town meeting, right?
Yeah.
In the comments, you can describe what the plan is, what the plan to replenish is.
Okay. Good. Okay,
So,
interesting.
Do you mind if I highlight a few other things on the
love it.
list? Okay,
Can I
so,
ask one more
Yep.
question before we do that? Memory stirs of a conversation with Michael the other day that we could cut somewhere else if we're going to do this project. Maybe it was on the free cash list. I think we had a.
well, I think there was the discussion if we could reduce the street lighting and the supplies now.
supplies.
But the problem is if it doesn't,
Okay.
You're gonna be, the first year, you're gonna be implementing this, right? So the first year, you're not gonna get the full savings, right? They have to all be up and operational before you'll start realizing the savings. So I think that could be a risky thing to do if the project gets delayed for
Okay.
whatever reasons.
All right, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, I think you'll find that, you'll see in the contingent budget, there's some street lighting increases on the DPW budget that were in the lower tier of priorities because we're hoping and we feel that this is a good project that will probably go forward, but I think in the non-contingent budget, that might be a little bit risky.
I think it'll come to me later. I can't quite remember what it was. There's something that was in the $80,000 range, but I don't remember where it was.
That's what it was. Street lighting supplies.
It was the supplies? Okay, all right, thanks. Thanks, Amy.
Okay, so one other thing I think that's important to point out is, you've probably heard in the past when we talk about the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, that one of the targets of that committee when looking at debt service and projecting out debt service if these projects are funded and bonded, what that will do to future debt service. And we've always tried to keep that at 1.9% of the excludable debt. This, if these items are approved, that will result in, the current non-exempt debt service is 2.09%, so we're currently above the 1.99. But this recommendation for bonding will increase that to 2.66 in FY20 and 2.52 in 2021. But the committee felt that there's too many things that are landing on the back burner, that we do have a proposed capital policy that be increased to 2.5 that just hasn't been formalized. And the 1.99 isn't formalized either, so we have flexibility to do that. But I just felt that that was important to point out that it is in excess of the 1.99 that you hear us talk about often.
Now, the thing you have to understand too, these are all based upon projections. You know, we have a spreadsheet that we load up with what we expect the bond rates to be, the band rates to be. Those clearly aren't exact sciences for many reasons. Number one, we use a single bond interest rate. You know, kind of shorter term bonds have different interest rates than longer term bonds. So we don't get into that much of the weeds. We're just using one rate. So
Right.
it clearly is an estimate of what we think might happen.
Yeah, and also on the out years, like we talk about all of the 5 years in the plan, but we really focus on the next year, the one that we're presenting forward to town meeting. So there's items that when we go to do 19, that we might have said we're gonna be bonded, that might get pushed out a year. So we still have flexibility in
Right.
those out years. So it's not that it will definitely be that, but the way we look at it is we really focus on the next current year, and then there
What-
might be in the out year some stuff that would get pushed out a little.
One problem we have with the way the town's approach to capital expenditures is, unlike other towns where they look at, the capital committee is looking at big ticket items, because we get so much deferred maintenance in this town. 90% of what we're looking at is not capital, but it's deferred maintenance. They can't be funded under the operating budgets. And that tends to, when you try and look at it over a 5-year period, that tends to change drastically. You know, that we'll come in next year, and the stuff that was on for, you know, this 3rd, 4th, and 5th year out, they're gone. They're replaced with something different. It drives you insane when you're trying to do 5-year planning. But it's just the nature of the beast because of what it is. You know, it's deferred maintenance, and some other piece of deferred maintenance becomes more important, and it gets shoved in its place, and you know, you get
Yeah.
that effect.
And I think this probably is to your point, Lee Michael, if you look on the recommended non-bonded items, there's a lot of facilities-related things. One of the other recommendations in the capital policy that we're looking forward to hopefully having approved is to increasing, right now, anything $10,000 or more has to go to the capital committee. Well, that's been there since eons ago, and in this day and age, 10,000 might sound high to you and I, but in the municipal world, 10,000 is a repair to a floor that really should be in consolidated facilities repair and maintenance, right? So a lot of these items under that section are part of the $100,000 that we're trying to get funded in the contingent budget for the consolidated facilities. That department should have a line item for these things, but it doesn't. So they often come to you as one-time requests, to this committee as one-time requests, and a duplicate request to the capital committee because they're $10,000 or more, and so it gets a little confusing, but a lot of those items which total, I think I put the total somewhere, 158,000, I think, if you total all those facilities-related ones for town and school. So those are things that we understand are important, should be funded, not really, the more should go on that consolidated facilities budget article as one-time use of free cash in the non-contingent budget. And then in the contingent budget, you could consider still funding them with free cash and then giving him additional money to try to catch up on the deferred maintenance. But that's what a lot of those are. Other big things or things to point out is you'll notice there's quite a few trucks there for DPW.
There are.
DPW fleet, to say it's aging is an understatement.
It's ancient.
There's stuff on there that's, there's one item that's 31 years old, 20 years old. We've more than gotten the original useful life out of it. And, we felt the need to start giving that department the equipment that they need to do their job. So that's why you'll see there's 3 large dump trucks on there that, come close to 600,000.
And they're well over 20 years old.
Yeah, what we did was we looked at the inventory and had discussions with the DPW director, and we're addressing the things that either are not working any longer or soon will not be. And there's
Comically,
a
there
strong
was,
need for
you'll
that.
notice there's a generator on there under DPW that is World War II surplus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, if,
We've only had it since 1963.
yeah.
Oh, we bought it used.
Steve,
Yeah, yes.
So, the other important thing to note is, the committee did feel it was important to make a significant, I don't want to say investment, because $1 million towards roadways, and as you all know, $1 million doesn't go that far, but it's much more than historically in this article we've dedicated to that, and
what was it last year?
I think it was like
500, I think.
400
Yeah.
or 500,000.
400?
And even if you go back a couple years, it's usually only 500,000 or less. And,
Okay.
we do need to address the roads. So we felt that was important to put an amount in there that
And $1
was
million
large.
is still about $2 million less than what
Yes.
the DPW.
2.6
Yeah, not quite,
million less.
because, yeah, because the $3 million that Joe puts in his request includes the 600,000 or 700,000 you get from.
Chapter 90.
Okay, so about $2 million less.
But to give you
2.5 or
yeah, to give you perspective, when Central Ave was done over, that was $1 million. So $1 million doesn't get you a lot of miles.
Yeah.
But we felt it was important to at least put something towards that. Another important item to look at under DPW projects is this handicap signal accommodations at Adam Street, Elliott, in the library corner. That has come through is it the Disabilities Commission or the Traffic
so.
Commission? One of
Yeah.
those commissions, there's at least one resident in town that this is needed for everybody, but felt that was very strongly supported to
Yeah, so it's
fund that.
the
that-
traffic light that beeps or whatever at you, so you can tell that it's a walking light.
Yeah.
And there is a person in that area that is visually impaired.
The other thing, let's see, that I want to mention is, I believe you have a separate article that's a citizen's petition related to the playgrounds. So the item that I actually put under parks is really related to that citizen's petition. And we're recommending an amount of, where is that? That's under free cash.
112,000.
112, and one of our committee members had a discussion with one of the playground planners members, I think it was the treasurer. I think they asked for 200,000, and the conversation was, well, what do you need to get the matching funding? And it was 112,000. We've already contributed 125. We have a lot of items on the capital request. We felt that if we contributed or appropriated what was needed to get the match, that would be a big help to that project and still be able to fund some other things through free cash.
I'd like to pause here for a few minutes.
Okay.
I agree with everything you said, but I want to amend it by noting that this will help them get the most recent match. And their total fundraising goal was what, over $600,000? And this level of funding plus last year's level of funding means that the town will have matched far less than 50% of the money that they raised. So I'm not thrilled with that number. I think it's great that we're putting money towards this, but I think that with the amount of work that those citizens have done and the use that those playgrounds get, and having 4 playgrounds, I think that we probably could have done a little bit better. I
Okay.
wish that we could have done better.
Fair
on this
enough.
number.
I think we all do, but there's a lot of capital needs of the town on the table, and I think we all recognize that that's a great project that they're doing. So we did what we felt the town could afford at this point in time.
But your recommendation doesn't come all the way up to the total amount of free cash that we have this year, right?
It does not.
No, it does not, because we understood there were other things.
There are other things, but I had on my spreadsheet for free cash $200,000 for the playground planners, and I'm wondering what the capital improvement planning committee would think if, I don't know what the number is, or if the rest of the warrant committee is in the same space that I'm in, but if there was or less $1,000 there that we thought that we could augment this number with to get it a little bit higher, to get them closer to the $200,000 ask, how would that be viewed? Does it have to go back to the capital
Yes, it
improvement
would.
planning committee?
I'm not prepared to speak on behalf of the capital committee.
How would it be viewed from our town accountants? I mean, I don't know what the whole process is.
It would have to go back to the capital committee. They would have to revote. It would have to go back to the Board of Selectmen. They would have to revote.
Okay.
This is the capital committee's recommendation, so I don't know how that works. If this committee or the Board of Selectmen wants to change something, I don't know how that works.
Well, there's all sorts of stuff, I'll come to you. in
Oh, no,
one
I'm sorry, I
second.
didn't know you said-
There's all sorts of stuff that we were hoping to do, we as a town, with the free cash that isn't in the capital improvement planning committee. And some of those things are going to be in excess of $10,000, and that's the limit right now. So it was the plan for all of those things to go back for a vote. I don't know.
We can
Not
only vote on
everything's
what
a
comes
cap-
before us, first of all. But,
Well, there's more than just a dollar amount that qualifies
The
something as a
useful
capital
life.
project, so it would be.
So none of the school stuff
No.
that is
They're books and
necessary?
texts, right? I didn't
Bond
see
that.
that list,
It's
other
gotta be
than
bondable too.
It's going to be bondable.
Well, it
it's got to
doesn't,
be useful life of more than 3 years and
5 years.
5 years. okay,
5-year
yeah.
useful life.
Okay.
Yes.
And none of the school stuff meets that criteria?
None of those items were submitted as a capital request, so I can't even
Okay.
answer that question, because I don't know what's on that.
So let's just consider, though, that the playground planners came in as a citizen's petition. And I'm wondering if there's some amount of funding that could be put under that article in addition to what was, I'm fine to go back to the
I
planning
guess, yeah,
committee.
let me back up. First of all, where it is a citizen's petition, I mean, it's different than a town request. I mean, obviously, town meeting has, has control over whether to approve the citizen's petition or not.
Yep.
You know, it's an article, it's on there, regardless of whether the town supports it or not.
Well-
We clearly do support what they're doing. I don't think, and unlike other capital projects, not a lot has come before us in terms of numbers and they're kind of a grassroots committee, so, I don't think we've actually really seen anything in terms of
We haven't. And
the
the
scope of the project or other than we know it's, they're looking for 750.
There's a schematic on every playground available on their website.
But nothing's been
nothing's come-
presented to the capital committee. Nothing's been requested to the capital committee.
Did you call them in?
Maybe they didn't know it.
No, I don't have a request.
Okay.
So this was.
Well, if you don't have a request, but this somehow got on here, that was
Because one of
because
the
I asked you
members,
to.
as a group, we knew it
Yeah.
existed, so, you know, we did the best that I mean, this is this is the committee's recommendation, you guys can do with it what you want, but I will say that the town bylaw, I don't believe regardless of funding, that a capital, something that fits the definition of a capital project can be approved without the capital committee's approval.
I agree with that. I
So,
read the bylaw.
It's certainly
I
something
agree.
that we can take back to the capital committee and ask them to reconsider.
Yeah.
But I feel that regardless of the funding, whether it's through the citizens petition article or through this article, that it
meets the
should,
definition
to
of
follow the
capital.
town bylaw, it should ultimately be approved by the capital committee. If I put my town accountant's hat back on, I'm not supposed to pay for things that aren't. I'm not supposed to let the town pay for things that aren't approved
Right.
under the bylaw. So
Okay.
it's kind of a
I spoke over Richard like
tricky
10
No,
times.
that's okay.
scenario.
I'm just having, in mind, so just for clarity, because I'm having trouble like seeing the whole picture of this, the playground one. And I think I'm on the same page as you, but my question is, well, I do have a first question because of what you just mentioned. So the town hasn't approved what they're doing, but they're moving forward? That sounds confusing.
The town has approved $125,000 towards playground equipment, and we purchased the playground equipment that they're paying to install at Shields.
Okay, so you do understand the scope of what the project is?
Yes.
At that playground.
At
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
I get it, okay.
Yeah.
So my other question back to the conversation, I know the sum that they've asked for, but I don't know where they are with what they've brought in and what they have left to capture beyond what we're thinking of giving them. Do you happen to know this?
We did have it, because again, April Lammer, we had some discussions
Right.
with the playground planners, did have a chart of what's been written. The biggest chunk raised
Was from the town, I
was from the
believe,
town
so far.
at this point.
And don't forget, we gave them $125,000
Oh, no, I
last
understand
year,
that, but.
so.
I thought I
Richard,
heard-
my understanding is that if we, if the town approves this 112,000, and then they get the matching dollars for the 112,000, that brings them to just over 600,000.
And they need to get to 750.
Yeah, and so if approval of 200,000 had gone through, they would have gotten to right around 700,000, and they said, we think we'd be able to raise that last 50 within the next year, was what I heard from them.
Okay, thank you.
There was close to 10 million in requests for 2018 from all the different departments, so we would very definitely take it back and scramble over any additional dollars. We wouldn't-
Right,
it's
and
not
we
gonna
did
miss-
have lengthy discussions on it. We didn't take it lightly. April went
I don't
above
think-
and
I don't
beyond
think
and
anybody
and
took it
called
lightly.
and talked to somebody from that group, so.
It moves them a big step in the right direction.
And
It
it's not
does.
to say that we couldn't do more in the
And I'm just
future
wondering
year.
about the process, because there's that big chunk of free cash that we still have to talk about, and I was, in my head,
So-
thinking some of it was going to be qualified as capital, but it
Okay.
sounds like not.
So if I could make a recommendation, if this committee would like the capital committee to reconsider the amount of the recommendation, then by all means, you can communicate that through Tom and I, and we can bring it back to the capital committee and have further discussions about it. So
Okay.
you don't have to agree with everything on here,
Right.
right? That's why we come to the Board of Selectmen, and that's why we come to the warrant committee with it as a recommendation.
Yep.
So, but I would just say the right thing to do would be for us to bring it back to the capital committee, because we all want to, when you go to town meeting, we all want to be on the same page with it, right?
Yep.
You don't want to say, well, the capital committee didn't agree with the warrant committee, which didn't agree with the Board of Selectmen, so.
In previous years, you went back and forth, I remembered a couple of years ago. You've taken things off and then came back to
We
it.
have made changes,
Yep.
you know, additional recommendations or change things when additional information was brought forward. We re-voted, and I came back to the selectmen and this committee with the changes. So
Okay.
it's not something that's
Well, thank
unheard
you
of.
for pausing for a few minutes on that point. We can come
So
back
we
to
good
it
with
later.
that one?
If anybody else feels as strongly as I do, we can come back to it later,
Okay.
talk about it again.
The other thing that I want to mention, and it slipped my memory last night, so I apologize when I presented to the Board of Selectmen, but there's an item in the bonded capital items for the athletic, that's not the right word, the recreation service, or the 4 tennis courts in the front of Kelly Field. So this recommendation is for the refurbishment of the front Kelly Field courts with a 4 in parentheses. And what happened with that for $215,000? What happened with that was the capital committee was given an original capital request for a project that scope. 4 tennis courts at Kelly Field, the front courts. They're severely damaged. They need to be resurfaced. Potential safety hazard. Then the committee was approached with the Parks Commissioners, which is an elected board, revised the request, and they changed the scope of the project from 4 tennis courts to 2 tennis courts, and eliminating 2 tennis courts and replacing them with a street hockey court. The committee did get some public support for that, but their concern was you're significantly changing what's there. And the fact that that wasn't publicly vetted concerned several members of the capital committee.
Well, it's a little more than the public vetting is one thing. I mean, that's beyond our purview, but I think most of the committee, the argument was made that 4 tennis courts were needed, that they were used, they were needed. And then all of a sudden, they're not needed. So we didn't see any overwhelming evidence either way, that, either they are needed or they're not, but certainly if they're not needed, we wouldn't approve a capital project for 2 tennis courts that aren't needed. But nobody showed us any evidence, are they needed or aren't they? So that, I think that was the overwhelming problem we had with the request. We think that a street hockey court is a great idea, but, which is the more overwhelming need? Is it tennis courts or is it street hockey? I mean, I don't know. And I think that's the problem we have with that request.
So the revised request was actually for $255,000. So the committee approved a recommendation for the original project, the 4 tennis courts. We were all in agreement that something needed to be done there. If they're not repaired, those courts could come out of circulation altogether and be locked up and not used at all. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention that that was an item that was approved differently than what the revised recommendation was.
Can I
even if-
re-summarize maybe?
What's that?
I just wanted to double check that I followed. So right now it's approved by the committee at $215,000
Yes.
for 4 tennis courts, and they want $255,000 for 2 tennis courts and a street hockey
Right.
area.
But the way that it's worded is the way it will go in the warrant, and there can be no change if this is bonded money to be 4 tennis courts. If they all of a sudden put in 2 tennis courts and a street hockey court, that could be a potential problem with the bonding.
So where's the Parks Department on this now? Are they happy to have 4 tennis courts? I'm guessing not, because one of the park commissioners was telling me the other day how excited she is about the street hockey.
Right.
Right, so,
Like I said, just the case wasn't made, I mean, how can you argue first that there's a overwhelming need for 4 tennis courts, and then all of a sudden there's not?
I don't have enough information
But-
unless
Yeah,
they had an
we didn't have enough
outpouring
information
of
to
public
approve it as a capital
support or
project.
something. I have no idea.
but I think I need to go on record as, even if they come up with the additional funding of the 40,000,
Right.
they can't use this money to go with it, because this is for 4 tennis courts.
When is your next meeting?
Tomorrow morning.
Say it again?
Tomorrow morning.
Well, that's great.
7:15, if anyone would like to join
When is your
us.
next meeting after?
Fall town meeting could change the purpose.
They could, but they wanted to do it over the summer, which is where the dilemma, right? So if we didn't approve, the committee didn't approve anything, nothing would get done. But the way it's currently worded, it's the only thing they can do with that money, unless we get a legal opinion, but that's my understanding of however it's printed in the warrant we've had these conversations before. However, if it goes in the warrant like this, which is how we wrote the recommendation specifically because the committee was approving 4 courts.
Well, to give the Parks and the Capital Improvement Planning Committee and the public time to figure that out,
We could change
could
it.
this be called refurbishment of the tennis court area and take out the number
That-
4? And
That was discussed,
Okay.
but there was a strong opinion of the members of the committee that there wasn't support for voting it that
Could
way.
be a friendly amendment at town meeting, too.
It could, or we could re-vote it and there could be an insert at town meeting. You know, there could be a change to the article as an insert at town meeting.
Phil?
Right.
But I think we need to figure it out
Okay.
the sooner
Maybe
rather
Phil has a
than
great
later.
idea.
Well, I don't know, are these courts used by the schools for the
Yes.
tennis team?
Yes.
And do they need more than 2?
They're used by the schools for gym, and they're used by the schools, school tennis.
And would 2 courts alone be enough for the tennis team?
Well, there's also 3 in the back, right? There's 3 in the back?
Yeah. It's,
Get back to the high school, you mean?
No, in the
Kelly
back
Field.
of Kelly Field.
Oh, okay.
that's unclear.
There's 7. it's
And
like-
that's part of the dilemma of the capital committee is
Those courts
we don't
also
have
get used by the
evidence
general
of what the
public.
bigger need is. Like,
And when they're used by the general public, you know, the people don't reserve the courts, so people just walk up and use them, so there's no real documented amount of use that they get. So we really don't know. There's no statistics on how often they're used. But like I said, initially, when they asked for the capital project, they said that it was needed because they were used frequently.
Chairman Walker, would you like to join us?
Yeah. Not in the capacity as chairman.
Leroy, would you like to approach the
Member of the
table?
Capital Committee. Just a little bit of context. This was an interesting process where in a period of 5 weeks, the Parks Department came in and said, the tennis courts are a critical need. They're in disrepair, they're used by residents, they're used by the schools, they're in use all the time, and there's a real safety hazard. They showed us pictures of all the cracks. They said there's a very small window of time where we can get this done, where the activity actually goes down a little bit, schools are closed, so we have to do this in a very short period of time during the summer. This is a critical need. 5 weeks later, they came in and said, that's not a critical need at all. What the critical need is for street hockey, and we've got a little street hockey league going that's informal right now, and we really think we should create a facility for that.
Without having been in that room, I can see how those two things do go together. Because what Amy mentioned was that the courts were in such disrepair that they're in danger of being roped off and not used anymore. So I can understand they need to be addressed. And so idea 1 was replace them with like kind. And then they went away
Right.
from that meeting and said, well, wait a minute, if we're going to do a project, why wouldn't we add some new amenity to the town? And then they reapproached you and said, since we're fixing something that's terribly broken, we'd like to do this other thing in addition.
Right, but the other relevant fact was they said the usage of the tennis courts was high. So the question was, have you done any public discussion of this?
Okay.
So you might be able to see whether your constituents across the town would prefer to have 2 fewer tennis courts and street hockey or 4 tennis courts. We asked the commissioner that. He said no and offered no idea about how they might gain that information.
That's not helpful.
I think the biggest thing was if you could do it without reducing the number of courts, it would be a no-brainer.
And you
The
could do that,
concern
but it'd be a
was-
bigger capital project, then, obviously, because there is room to build
But
street hockey courts
well,
there,
he
but
kind of said there wasn't, because that question was, but then it comes up, and I'll just say that, it again is one of those fine lines. You have an appointed committee approving and recommending capital projects, and then you have an elected board changing what the scope of the project is. So where is that line for who determines? And we felt it was the capital committee, but I don't really know. So it's way more complicated than.
Yes, Richard?
Clarity, it sounds like the answer is there isn't, but is there not time to figure this out or no?
There
Yeah.
is, we could definitely,
It just seems like if you just
Reconsider it
run with
if-
one direction, you're gonna make some people angry. You run with the other one, you're gonna make some people
Exactly.
angry.
Yes.
So you might wanna figure it out first.
And
Right.
again, it's up to the.
I know it's easier said than
It's up to the departments and boards that come before us to.
Figure it out.
To advance their capital project and show us the need.
so at this point in time, with the information the committee had, the recommendation is for 4 tennis courts. If the Parks Commissioners come forward with additional information, like,
What is your meeting after tomorrow?
we will decide tomorrow when the next one is.
Okay.
But we'll continue
But
to
we
meet
could-
throughout.
Is it possible you could meet the week after that, around the 15th or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd have to
Because
pull
the,
the,
the warrant goes to print in 2 weeks from tonight. So if the Capital Improvement Planning Committee can meet on the 15th-ish, and the Parks Department is interested in coming in with additional information that they think could fix this situation, then it does sound like that there might be just barely enough time to figure it out. But that's leaving a lot of stuff for us to vote later.
right. So,
Okay.
right, so that was the tricky one I should have brought up
Leroy,
last
would you
time.
like to join us at the table?
I'm not sure it leaves enough time to figure it out, because the key question was public input. So if the Parks Commissioners took the suggestion and actually acted on that, then perhaps we will have enough time. But if they simply come in and say, we really think this is a priority, and the question is still, well, does the town think it's a priority?
If we think that there isn't time, then I think that the warrant committee is probably going to be inclined to say, remove $212,000 of requests from this number, because I don't think that it's fiduciarily responsible to build something that you're telling me that many people don't want to build.
We don't know if it's many.
Well,
We had 7 emails in support, but there also was no publicity around the change, so,
Support of what, the hockey or?
the hockey.
Okay.
But there wasn't any, hasn't had any publicity for
But if the park
either side to
commissioner-
come out.
if the park commissioners are coming to you saying that they want to change the request,
Right.
it doesn't
And they're an elected board.
Makes
That's where the
sense.
confusion comes in.
It doesn't make sense to me to continue on, but I'll come to you and then Lucinda.
I mean, isn't it clear that 2 tennis courts are going forward regardless?
No, because you have to dig up the whole surface,
Okay. That's
right? So what it is either way you dig up the whole surface, you'd surface it, and then you would do different fencing, and you'd put the street hockey boards around it. So the surfacing part will still only cost $215. The additional $40,000 was to put the additional higher fencing, as well as the street hockey boards around the sides.
And a scoreboard.
And a scoreboard, and to put like another entrance so that you didn't have to go through the street hockey to get to the tennis or vice versa.
Lucinda?
When you started talking about these tennis courts, I assumed that the schools had been using them too as part of their program. And since I'm a childhood tennis player, I have been watching the Milton tennis team, and they are very good. I can't imagine we're going to let the team go down by
Well-
not letting them have enough courts to play on. They need to have practice courts, and then you have people come and visit you, and you play against. And so, therefore, I think someone jumped the gun because, some new people were elected to a committee, and they decided they had all the power, and they could say, oh, I want a street hockey. Well, as a tennis player, I don't want street hockey.
Well, that was the committee's concern, is if people don't know about it, and all of a sudden, they go over there one day and there's 2 less tennis courts and this great street hockey, there's gonna be a lot of people that are thrilled about that, and there's gonna be a lot of people that aren't. And without the proper research, how do you make the determination of,
And there was some question too of
Significantly
whether
changing that.
whether the tennis team was using the Wollaston Golf Course tennis courts at times, and the Curry tennis courts at
Well,
times.
that type of thing happens, but
Right.
still.
What is the, Richard,
Okay.
yes, Richard?
Just real quick, I'm sorry, you might have already said it, but has the schools said what they
no, none
feel
of,
about it? Okay. Because I would imagine, that's a big question, public opinion aside. Does the schools actually use them? Do they need them?
The schools do use them, yes. That's not the question.
Okay.
I think the question is whether, as Ms. Larson said, there's a public use that is clear, earlier in our process, as I said, it was a 5-week period during which they changed the discussion, but initially they said that the courts were well-used during the day, during the evenings, on weekends, and this really needed to get done. So at least their initial view was, based on the information they had, that these courts are used on a regular basis. We did, I think, as Selectman Hurley said, we did make the split the baby proposal, which was, isn't there enough room at Kelly Field to do both, to leave 4 tennis courts and create the street hockey? The answer was yes, but it might be a little more expensive.
Well, I'm wondering about the 3 courts in the back. Do we know what the age or condition?
They were done about 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, they're
The
newish.
original project requests, when those were done, were to do
All of
all
them.
7 at once, and we split it up
Well,
into 2
I think I'm back
phases.
to your original recommendation, which is the 4 courts are in terrible disrepair. They need to be repaired. The Capital Improvement Plan Committee voted to repair them at the request of the Parks Commissioners. Why wouldn't the Warrant Committee support that and give the parks between that approval and town meeting to figure out if they want to go in a different direction and have support? They come back to the Warrant Committee and the Capital Improvement Planning Committee during the month of
Right.
April, ask us to revote the recommendation, and we could press out a printed copy if the Warrant Committee is so inclined to do so.
Right,
Exactly.
You like that idea?
that's fine.
And we talked about that too, but, right.
That after my angry rant, that's where we would get.
No, I mean, I didn't mean to turn a conversation that's usually pretty quick, but
Sorry, I got a lot of emails.
It was
last
the
night.
one item that wasn't a unanimous
Okay.
vote by the Capital Committee, so I felt it was important to at least mention it.
Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, and I don't think I have anything else to point out unless you guys have some specific questions on any of the items.
I was just peeking at Michael, did you have something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a-
Wait, your hand was like this. I couldn't.
It was, I was trying to find out how many questions I had.
Half a question.
And I had no idea we were going to talk about the surfacing of the tennis courts for as long as we did, so maybe I'm going to
Now you're an
self-edit
expert.
right here, you
You're
know,
an
some of
expert
these
now.
questions.
Yes.
I mean, one of them was the dump trucks. There's one that's 199,000 and 2 that are 178, and 2 that are 178 have, looks like more stuff, but they have with a dump and a sander and a plow.
Yeah, I didn't bring the detail.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
I
They
can
were
get back to
justified.
you.
Must be
It was
something great about the one that's-
different models.
Something great.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, I'm
and then
not
there's
really sure.
preserving permanent records.
Yes.
$150,000. Is that related to those old records that were passed around here?
Yeah, so
Yes.
if you recall, the town clerk had it both in operating and in a capital request. She said, you know, we could either fund it all up front, we could fund it in pieces, or you could put it in the operating budget. So this 150,000 is just to give her free cash to just do it, get it done, and not revisit it.
My recollection was that the total cost was 150, and the Warrant Committee approved 10-ish last year.
Yeah, I thought we were doing it
2 years, I think we've done something, haven't we?
15,000 a year or something.
Yeah.
There should be no more than 140.
Maybe we have some
I thought
playground
it was
money.
on there as 150, so I don't know
I
if she
think that's
revised
because
it.
that was the original cost.
It's possible, so we can revisit that item.
Where is it?
It's $150,000 towards the, I don't know, it's very fine print on this phone, but towards the bottom.
Is it in the town clerk?
It's right up there on the screen. Town clerk preservation of permanent.
No, I mean in last year's budget.
Oh, last year's budget.
We're looking at the warrant.
Last year's warrant, I mean. Amy, you know where it is. Can you tell me?
Let's see.
Did we put that in capital last year?
Oh.
Yeah, it's in the capital article,
That's why I
Article
can't
6,
find it.
the last item.
Yeah.
Yeah, we funded
I don't know if it
15,000.
discusses what the
15.
original request was.
I
And
believe that was an
Phil, you
estimate.
think we did it 2 years in a row? I thought
we
last
did
year was
some-
the first
2
year.
years in a row.
I don't
I
recall.
think
Small
last
amount
year
to
was
her-
the
to her
first year
operating
because
budget.
she did the,
She handed
brought the old ones. This year she brought the ones that were
Would
done.
you mind rechecking that for us?
Yeah, so
I think that
you want
might-
us to check it and reconsider voting that if it should be reduced by 15 or 30,000?
Yes, please.
And then security cameras, $210,000 total for security cameras.
Yeah, many of those are at the high school, or at the schools, I believe.
And this is a multi-year project, I think. We did some last year.
So
Right, so-
security cameras there are actually three. So there are cameras for the piers and cameras for the four elementary schools. The cameras for the piers are correctly termed security cameras. They're interior cameras. The elementary school cameras are exterior cameras for the most part. And the idea is there is to prevent some vandalism that's gone on over the last few years.
So is someone monitoring these cameras, someone watching the screen? Are they-
Film mostly.
The exterior cameras are on a loop. The interior cameras, whenever school is in session, they're being monitored.
Okay. I mean, it sounds, like all the lockdowns that have been happening and stuff at the school, I understand the need for.
Yeah, the interesting thing, you might ask, because we did a fairly large program that you approved 2 years ago, and it turned out that when we did the piers, there were still some blind spots, so this is to correct that problem. So they have some cameras there, we need to correct some blind spots.
Thanks.
Is that it, Michael?
That's all I got.
Amy, are we missing, or is this somewhere else, the variable message board? Is that on there somewhere?
That wasn't submitted.
Michael, this was one of your things. 40,000 for a variable message board? That sounds capital-y to me.
It was for 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
but still.
But yeah, it
still
would be capital, yeah.
The radar speed monitors would not be capital.
So that wasn't.
Again, if those have come to you, we can consider them.
Yeah.
Well, they came from the town administrator.
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
It's not my idea.
It just wasn't on our list, that's all.
Okay. Yes.
Did you, the parks talked about wells?
Mm-hmm.
Did they
Yes.
come to you for that?
Yeah,
or was that
that's
not
a project that's out a year or two.
Okay.
In
And we
2020.
had discussed whether we should push that up, because it
Just
is.
generate savings.
Yeah, and the reason we didn't is, while it does generate, overall, 90% of the water and sewer enterprise fund is the MWRA charge. And the feeling was that, well, yes, it will significantly reduce the water bill to the town. It doesn't significantly reduce the MWRA charge. So really what you'd kind of be doing is pushing that cost out to the taxpayers, or the ratepayers, overall. So while it probably does make sense, I'm not sure that there's an overall savings to the town as much as there's an overall savings to the town government.
Right, the park, yeah.
Yeah.
The other comment that was brought up at the meeting was, first of all, it's in an out year. I think it's in 2019 or 2020. But also, we would like them to quantify the savings too, so that we can make an educated decision about it. So we felt like we needed more information on that item also.
Okay. That was attractive to the warrant committee, so I'd love to see that come back. It sounds like it's still on the list. So, Mr. Dennehy, what do you want to do about the variable message boards? Do you want the capital improvement planning committee to reconsider that, or do you want to resubmit that next year?
I would hope that we could get it reconsidered tomorrow.
Amy, would you mind reconsidering the
Well,
variable message board?
And I wouldn't even call it reconsidering, because I
Amy,
didn't even put it
surprise.
on the list.
Your boss
So my
wants
mistake.
variable message boards
No, we
at
can
a
talk
clip
about
of
that
$40,000. Okay,
And did I hear you right that you want us to reconsider the wells?
I don't.
Not this year.
I don't think the money is there for it.
Okay. So we're reconsidering the preservation of permanent records, the amount on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not reconsidering, we're gonna,
Consider.
put the 40,000 on the list, because I didn't capture that properly. And then.
And is there a justification for that we will be able to look at? Message boards?
Yeah, Michael will get to you just.
I don't want them to have to come, I mean,
I could probably do that tomorrow morning.
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, and then, we'll talk to the parks commissioners about getting further information on the scope of that project.
That's great. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions, comments, or concerns about? Yes, Phil.
The voting machines, I assume that we're replacing 12 of the older machines and the same type that we have now?
Yeah,
Or are we
so-
converting to new?
In a prior year, we replaced half, or we replaced some, and this is the balance of what's left. So this will mean that all of her voting machines are updated and new.
I wish I was a little further along in where we were with the free cash spreadsheet, because then I could maybe request you to relook at that playground equipment.
Well, I'll put that on the list for tomorrow also. And-
How does the committee feel? Are you happy at 112, or were you hoping for a different number for that? Because I can't be a one-person guy here. Yeah.
I just think we're further, I'm not opposed to it, but I'd like to be more refined on free cash. I feel like we're a little blind at this point.
I guess the other question too is how, is that a capital project now, or is that a capital project a year from now, or 2 years? You know, how quickly is that project? Because I don't have any of that information really, but.
Did they say they're gonna start with one playground?
They started
Yes.
last
They
week.
started. Field
Yeah,
already.
And that's been fun.
How long does it take to build?
I don't think it probably doesn't take that long, no.
So I was kind of on the same page as you. I mean, but obviously it matters what it looks like, the free cash. But I mean, it would be nice if you can push that project.
I'm just wondering about timing. If we end up having $30,000-$40,000 in free cash or something, we can get that up to 150, and you haven't already considered it, then we have to come back to you, and but that's what we'll do. Okay.
Well, could we consider a vote that if there's available for funds from free cash? I don't know if we could vote it that way.
Well, I mean,
There's a lot of other
I'll tell you, I'm happy
Steve.
at 112, and I'm gonna be happy at 112 tomorrow morning when we're talking about this. And if other things come up, if money comes free, there's lots of other things to look at.
Right.
I think this brings this a long way and gets them their match, so.
And it doesn't prevent
The other
us
thing,
from
too,
doing
is
it in the future.
we were kind of looking at it as a matching grant as opposed to a capital project. I mean, it really, you know, because it really wasn't before us. It was before us kind of a citizen's petition for money, not for, you know, which is going to actually ultimately result in capital projects, but it wasn't really before us per se as a capital project.
Phil, and then Richard.
And it's something we could bond if it was before us as a capital project, perhaps. Maybe we would decide not to, but, you know, that wasn't the best
Phil.
way, but.
Do we have a prioritized list of other items that were on your wish list that are not being funded under this scenario?
There are tons of things on the list. I don't know if it's
No,
prioritized per
it's not
se.
prioritized.
You guys wanted to spend some time tomorrow morning discussing that and giving us 4 or 5 of your top items that didn't get funded?
Sure.
In case when we start looking at free cash?
I think it's a good question, because
That's a good.
I think there's going to be a delta right now from what I know that was on the free cash worksheet and what is now
You got
on
money
this.
for a fire station?
No. I think that I think
small
that,
one.
I think that if there's a gray area, I think it's about $200,000. If everything that the schools asked for and the stabilization funds were all funded, I think that leaves us $200,000 to still work with.
So another thing you could consider is not taking the full 750 out of the cap state.
Okay.
But we'd be better off to get capital items that way.
Right.
But,
All right, Richard?
yeah,
So I agree with you, but I do agree with these comments about waiting and looking, but just for what it's worth, I get the comment about how, you know, you're getting them down the road, they're doing some, they're gonna do others, but I think those things go in pretty fast, and we've been talking forever about how many, you know, how great this town is, and a lot of people are moving in with their young families. When you do just a portion of it, you're helping out one section of town. And so if we're all saying how many young families are coming in, you overwhelmingly see, at least I do on social media in this town, that there's tons of young families using these parks. I go and use these parks with my little kids. And there are some that are in really bad shape. And so, you know, if you can move it along so that everybody gets to take advantage of some nice parks in a shorter period of time, not 3 years out, I got to be honest with you, if there's money sitting there, I'd rather see it go here to push it along.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll keep.
Could you contact the playground planners and get them to confirm that they could actually use $211,000 in the next fiscal year? Because if they can't,
The max they were looking for was 200,000, and that was going to get them, after they got their match and everything, to 700,000.
yeah, I
So
just
they'd
want to
still-
confirm that they would be able to use it in the next
They
fiscal
did say
year.
that to me. I had a long conversation with Sarah after she appeared here to re-verify all the numbers, and I did send out she actually sent out an email after that conversation and sent it out to everybody. So the money is usable.
The only other comment I want to make is, and it's just my old soapbox, but we probably spent well over $1 million in park improvements over the last few years. I think if you add them all up, that could have been funded by community preservation. 25 or 30% of it would have been funded by the state. But just a conversation for another day.
Feel free to put that
Gotta
as an
come up with
article in the future. Okay, yeah, I think that in the end, what I was trying to get at was, what are we going to do with that $200,000 in free cash? And because I think some of it might end up looking like capital, and so I'm concerned now that the recommendation comes in below the whole number that we have to work with.
So are you voting a different free cash number for non-contingent than you are for contingent?
Why wouldn't we? Because the consolidated facilities line specifically has $78,000 in it for non-contingent, and it doesn't need to be there for contingent.
Because you could also use some of the free cash to bond fewer things and then smooth out that spike to 2.52 or 2.66. So that's something to discuss too.
You could also let the free cash just roll through to next year.
I'm surprised that,
You could do that.
it'll be interesting when we pull the list together, because I'm surprised that you're estimating about 200,000 less, because I got the impression from emails I saw flying around that there wasn't a whole
here's the
lot
worksheet.
available, but,
The repairs and maintenance line was $78,000.
okay, so that's
Parks.
now 158, if you go by this list.
Okay.
Because this has 158,000 of repairs and maintenance. Well, that would be duplicated there.
It would be duplicated. So we have sick leave buyback, master plan, which is going to come off this list. Then we have all of the school's requests. I don't think that there was anything that's the school. And then we have the general and capital stabilization fund. So that's a max of $562,000.
So you're missing OPEB.
Okay.
You should make a contribution or consider
It's
an
150?
appropriation
Is
to
that about
OPEB. That's what we did
Other
last year.
articles, OPEB.
Down here. It's 200. I put it in at 200.
Okay.
So it was a minimum of 562,000. That gets you to 700, and so that's about there, I guess. Because you did 750,000, and that gets you to about 700,000. So maybe it's a difference of 50 to 100,000 once some of this stuff comes off.
So what am I missing? Where do you have the capital of 760 on there?
I didn't have this when we made the worksheet.
No, I know that, but I should see if I'm reading that right, a difference of 118,000.
No, I don't. I'm just trying to add up anything that I have that isn't already on your list.
Okay.
So if I take off maintenance and repairs, and let's just put in 200,000 for OPEB, and then is there anything else that you would move up?
I can't read it, honestly.
Okay.
So we can work through that, maybe.
Master plan's already up there at 15, maybe it's 40, but that brings me to 684,000, and this leaves a delta of 750,000. So the difference between 750 and 684 is the minimum that we don't have to appropriate free cash for. Minimum request.
In other words, his list is, you get 750 on your list, or 760 on your list. You get 760 on your list. for free cash.
760 plus your 600,000 there is more than, is about the $1.3 million, isn't it?
Yeah, it is about $1.3 million.
So that's why where's
closer
the
to
extra
$1.4 million.
money?
1,000,004. Okay.
Maybe, right? So that's 100,000, 70,000 more than what the free cash number is.
All right. That everything
So-
is in there now. Okay. So sorry.
So we can work through and fine tune it offline, but,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think we're looking at 200,000 that we're trying to find a home for.
I think I had OPEB below the line is
Yeah.
my problem.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, sorry, this was so
Well,
long.
at least I was afraid that we weren't ready to talk about free cash next Wednesday, but now we can.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
I'm not going to save any of those changes. All right, thanks. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns about the Capital Improvement Planning Committee request? No. Thanks, Tom. Nice to see you. If anybody asks, you were not in the room at the same time as David.
I wasn't.
Thanks, Amy. David, do you want to come up and talk about some articles with us?
I didn't even recognize Tom when I came in.
He wasn't here.
Tom who?
Tom, how are you guys?
Good.
We're
having me.
great. So, Selectman Burns is here to talk about several articles that are sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. And there was a couple in particular that you wanted to address, right? Do you want to start with the paid military leave?
Sure. So the paid military leave, to which our board voted unanimous on to submit to you guys, it basically we're adopting Chapter 33, Section 59 of the Mass General Law. And what that does is anyone who is serving, currently serving, whether they are in the National Guard or active, we're basically making them whole, okay, during their time away from their time in town. So, for instance, I'll give an example, a firefighter. Firefighter schedule is different than your typical employee in the town. They work 24-hour shifts, okay, and it can sometimes fall on a Saturday or a Sunday. Now, if they go to training to the National Guard on their monthly training, they lose that pay. They don't get it back. So what we're adopting is 17 days out of the year they're able to they go on these training missions, and so what we're doing is making them whole at the end of the day, because otherwise they'd be losing 17 days of pay, which isn't fair. And so if we would ever go to veteran status, this gets us ahead of that, whereas if we're going to have to put people on, in veteran status, this is, in reality, it's what we should be doing. People shouldn't be penalized for serving. So it's a pretty cut and dry policy.
Do you anticipate impacts on overtime budgets?
No, I mean, we only have, I believe, 3. We're going to have 1 go overseas who didn't, but it's forecasted. They know when they're going to be doing these trainings, and somebody else is taking their position during that period of time. But so if there is any cost, it's a cost, for them serving our country, in fact, but doing training for the military on our behalf.
So it's the differential between what they earn as a guardsman?
Correct.
And
Correct.
then-
They don't make any more.
They don't make any more?
No, we're making them whole.
Got it,
Okay.
understood.
I didn't understand that.
That's why I asked.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're making them
Maggie?
whole.
No, I'm just saying, I think it's about time we did this for our military personnel. I mean, they give their lives for us, they do everything for us. We need to respect what they do and how they keep us safe. I'm a firm believer of paying them when they're going off to protect us.
I appreciate that. I too believe as well, and I think that, I think if you go back and look since the 70s, there really hasn't been that many people who have, though, been in the National Guard, and I don't foresee, people aren't going to go line up and all of a sudden say, well, we've got this benefit, I'm going to go do this. They have families, it's time. It's all a credit to those that are currently serving or giving their time, but it's not going to be a great impact.
I have Betty, and then, Steve, and then
So-
Steve.
He was first?
Betty.
Okay. When a firefighter who goes to national goes to the reserves on a weekend, and that was his or her weekend to work in the fire department or the police department, how would those days off be,
Covered.
what's the word? How are they being counted right now? Are they taking sick days? Are they just excused absences, or?
No, they're taking time off. They're taking time off, yeah. They're
Personal
taking-
day sort of thing.
They're taking their time off, their scheduled time off.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's, you know, and the other thing is that, you know, there's also, you know, there's been portions of, you know, firefighter Allen, for example, who, you know, has, over the past, has served, has done this, and lost 102 hours because he hadn't had this. And that's something we'll have to take a look at as we move forward, you know, after we hopefully pass this at town meeting.
Yep.
And then discuss, you know, with the unions and follow through on that.
Go ahead.
Important to note, the town's really behind the curve on this too, aren't we?
Yeah, I think I think it's the right time to do it. I think, yeah, we are late, and it's a good thing that we're taking this seriously and gonna address it at town meeting.
Steve?
So is this only when there's a conflict with their regular schedule, or do they automatically get paid? for
Unless
17?
they had to serve, Steve, so.
Right, if they get called up, they
Correct.
absolutely should get every, you know, but I'm talking about, you know, you do the weekend, every other weekend, and then 2 weeks.
Correct.
So some weeks you're gonna have a weekend shift, and some weeks you're not.
That's correct.
So it's only on the
When
weeks
they're
when it's
impacted.
regularly scheduled. Any other town employees that are in the guard or something?
Yeah, I think we have three firefighters and one DPW, so I think there's 4 total.
Okay, and
I could,
The
excuse me for
weekends
one second,
wouldn't-
I want to make sure of that. Okay, I'm sorry, 2 firefighters and 1
and the
DPW.
DPW guys would be on the regular work, so it would be the differential for 2 weeks in the summer.
That's correct. Or deployment, right. As you
Yeah,
said.
To me, that's a different animal.
Yeah.
Deployed, you should get everything.
Chuck?
I'd like to make a motion to vote the article as drafted.
The recommendation.
Recommendation, excuse me.
All right, thank you, Maggie. Discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
No, thank you.
Thank you. You wanted to talk about fundamental speed limit?
Yeah, so, fundamental speed limit, obviously, the city of Boston has adopted this. They've adopted it, I think, pretty much wholly, you know, it's, you know, even see Mass Ave is 25. We're not doing that. We're doing this in the neighborhoods where there is, there could be potential congestion with cut-through traffic. I think that it only serves a purpose to help create a safer environment for our children and our seniors and our families. You know, we don't have any data currently right now. I do know that Lee Toma from the Bicycle Committee, who's been very active and vigilant on a number of you know, safety measures as it comes to roads, has mentioned to us that when someone is hit at 25 miles an hour, there's a 90% chance of survival as opposed to 40 miles an hour where it's 50% chance. So I guess that's real data that he's received. The bottom line is this, that we know that cut-through traffic, we know that speed is a problem in our town, and that we feel that this would be a good step in the right direction. I think that under Chief King, his guidance, be good to have both chiefs on board, and I'm sure we will sometime. You know, under his guidance, you know, we'll be able to, and the Traffic Commission will be able to come up with some pretty good solutions. I think that, you know, you're looking at new traffic signs, so to troubleshoot that is one of your potential costs. I don't know exactly how many there would be, because we haven't decided what exactly these roads will be designated quite yet.
I'm going to come to Maggie in just one second. I just wanted to point out that Mr. Dennehy mentioned during your meeting last night, I think that the way some towns do this is they have a sign at all the points of entry into the town that say the speed limit in this town is 25 unless otherwise posted. But I don't think that's what we're considering doing, because the Board of Selectmen, it sounds like they're leaning towards picking certain streets in certain areas as opposed to blanketing the whole town. Do I have that right?
You know, I mean, that would be, I don't want to speak right now out of line. Do you want to come up, Mike?
Sure. So it's a little about, it got a little convoluted last night. Lee Toma, who's here with us tonight, has done great work on this, as Selectman Burns had said. He captured a picture on L Street in South Boston, which reads, posted 25 unless, speed limit 25 unless otherwise posted. Because there are gateways into Milton that don't have that speed limit, that might be something that you would post on an Adams Street, or, coming into other parts of the town, not from Boston, where it is 25, and they've already absorbed that. The city council passed that vote, and it went into effect on January 9th. But it was more so to talk about the sign itself, and it shows it very clearly that the speed limit is 25, and then tells the driver, unless otherwise posted. So it kind of gives unanimity to most of those streets. Again, I think Chief King would have to identify, what jurisdiction is ours, right? We can't touch streets that don't belong to the town of Milton, the DCR roadways, and then which of those meet the requirements to get it to 25. But yeah, not every street is going to be posted. That's not the intention.
Maggie?
I think this is a great idea. I think it's a little bit premature, well, in my opinion. You said hopefully Chief King will be on board. Well, he is in charge right now of traffic. He is the expert.
No, he is on board.
What I would prefer to know, have you spoken with the Traffic Commission? They're the traffic experts. I would love to hear their point of view and how they feel on any traffic-related issues, is my point. I think we're heading in the right direction, but I would still like to have input from the experts on this, which is the Traffic Commission.
I can speak on behalf of, the chair of the Traffic Commission came in and supported this, so I think that...
What about the
that
rest
is,
of the
that
members?
is Chief King. Well, I think he's speaking on behalf of the commission at that point. If Lee Michael's speaking on behalf of, at a meeting on behalf of his committee, I would assume that's the same case.
Just wanted to clarify that Chief King did say that he supported it. He said he was concerned about some of the enforcement, but he said he thought it would be, he could figure it out.
He also was concerned a little bit about the data, where there wasn't so much as far as going from 25 to 20, and I think you had requested, Steve, some additional data. I feel we have something from 2010, but if there's not a lot of data on this, I think that I would feel more comfortable, getting more information about this.
Chuck, and then Richard.
So is it from 30 to 25?
Correct.
Okay.
Richard?
Simple question.
Just from my point of view, I live on a cut-through, and have you ever seen somebody going 30 down some of these small streets? That's ridiculously fast. So, no, I just want to finish. So 25, I don't imagine that all of a sudden we're going to see tons of tickets being given out, and all of a sudden everybody come to a screeching halt. But I think it's in the step in the right direction, because I would rather see, I'd rather see people slow down on some of those roads.
So who determines which streets are going to change the 20?
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
Sounds like the
well,
Board of Selectmen.
Wouldn't it be better to have the traffic
Well,
personnel?
not unlike the zoning articles that we just reviewed. Approving this article doesn't change the speed limit in the town. It authorizes the Board of Selectmen to have a public process to discuss changing that speed limit in either certain areas of the town that are thickly settled, or having a universal speed limit. So I assume that there would be a chance for public feedback and participation with
Absolutely.
the Traffic Commission. Richard?
No, I'll wait for he.
Good. Oh, sorry. I didn't see.
So thickly settled is capital T, capital S, right? Doesn't it mean, that there's a definition for what that means,
Yeah,
correct?
that's true.
Correct. So that's like houses every quarter mile, blah, blah. So it's pretty, or business district, that's a defined term as well. So it's pretty clear on where they can or can't do it. I think there's actually a lot of clarity in there.
Okay.
Not that we have a lot of farm roads in
I didn't
Milton,
realize.
but
I didn't realize thickly settled was a real thing.
Yeah.
Thickly settled is a.
I think the point to follow up, as Richard mentioned, I'll give you a quick example. You look at Warrant Ave, okay? You go down Warrant Ave at 15 miles an hour, okay, or 20 miles an hour. Okay, you feel like you're just going on. People are going 40 miles an hour down that street. We have kids from Milton High crossing that street in the middle school daily, okay? Kids coming out of it. That is a scary street. It's a cut-through. That's a prime example of a street that should be cut down to speed.
That's your street, too.
Richard?
Absolutely. As well.
I gotta be honest with you, and again, I don't speak for myself, but I can't imagine that going from 30 to 25 is a negative thing, that anybody is gonna really be angry that we gotta slow down a little bit on some of these side streets. I would hate to see this get kicked down the road, so I would like to make a motion to pass as written.
To approve the recommendation as written.
Second.
Thank you, I heard your second, and discussion. Steve?
Yeah, the physics of a 40-mile-an-hour car versus a 25-mile-an-hour car is immense, so I get that the fatality rate is hugely different. This feels to me like it's a feel-good move. There's not going to be any additional enforcement, because there's barely enough officers to do law enforcement, so the traffic enforcement. So, if you're an idiot driving now 40 miles an hour on a 30-mile-an-hour street and you're getting away with it, dropping the speed limit, I would really like to see what happens in Boston over, the next little while, to see if there's an actual, impact. And, because just creating the impression that we're making the streets safer when not really making them any safer just doesn't seem to me to be a worthwhile endeavor. If Boston shows that there's, less accidents, less pedestrian accidents, less bicycle accidents, then I say, okay, let's give it a shot. They've got many more officers to do traffic enforcement too, but I live on a cut-through street and, deliberately drive down that street at 25 miles an hour during rush hour with people in my back window. And they're not just people cutting through, my neighbors, I don't, but, it doesn't stop them now, the fact that it's 30. If they want to go 35, 40, 45, or 50, they just do it. So, there's an expense to doing this, re-signing. There's the feeling that we're making streets safe. I question whether we actually are.
Richard?
So I would need probably Chief King to tell what the allowable is, but you gotta remember, the other side of this is, when it's posted 30 miles an hour, that doesn't mean you get pulled over at 31 miles an hour. Usually it's, I'll take a wild stab, but you gotta probably be going 40 to get pulled over and get a ticket. And so all this does is bring it down to, add 10 miles to that. It probably still means they could do it and get away with it. And so my opinion would be that this just is kind of the step in the right direction, and as the selectman said, there's still another process to this, and it's not like all of a sudden we approve this and all of a sudden we're gonna need new signs tomorrow.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, and then 1, 2, 3.
So with that being said, and Steve, I get what you're saying. I totally understand it, and trust me, I'm the same way. You see people in your back seat when you're driving, and will the enforcement take action? Well, Chief King came in and spoke before you guys just last week, and one of the top 3 things he said was traffic enforcement. That was on his plate from what he's gotten feedback. So I would anticipate, should there be no cuts with the police department, that is one of his top 3 priorities, and therefore, as a member of the board, I would be looking to him to enforce traffic, okay? And I think that, to Rich's point, it is a step in the right direction, that we would be looking for, traffic enforcement in the neighborhoods, that for people who are going above that speed limit. I think it would send a good measure and a good, message to people who are cutting through.
Go ahead.
And on the issue of enforcement, you got to keep in mind too, lowering that number just shrinks the barrier to criminal speeding, which is a huge deterrent. Now you got 40 over 25 is a big difference between 45 over 30, and it is a deterrent.
Maggie?
I agree with Steve. I think it is a feel-good issue. We have no one to enforce it, even though you're saying that Chief King's issue is traffic enforcement. Yes, it is, but he doesn't have an officer dedicated to that. His drug issues are also a very big deal with him. So what good is it expending all of these monies, because it's going to cost money, producing these signs, and then I think our town administrator wanted to buy radar guns. What are they going to sit in a closet till newer ones come out? We don't have the personnel around to do this.
Let me finish up on this, please. With all due respect, if there was a cut, he wouldn't have the ability to do it. If you were here last week and listened to what Chief King said.
I was here last week.
Yeah, exactly. And he did say that he would be following up on traffic enforcement should he have his maximum 6 patrol units. So I'll leave it at that. That's fine. I'm done.
Steve?
Yeah, from my perspective where I live, there's a significant number of stop signs to buffer the speed, and they don't. People roll, not even roll, but for example, I'm on Belcher Circle, so the corner of Bates and Belcher, if there were a traffic officer there in the morning, they could raise half the town's budget in a week because of people just full speed coming down Bates and running through that. And, you know, if there's an officer doing traffic there, there's an officer not doing traffic near one of the schools or someplace else. But, you know, in theory, you shouldn't be able to, unless you stomp on the gas between these stop signs, get up to 25 miles an hour, let alone above 30. So, you know.
Well, I respect
thought you
this
said we
body
were
of
done.
work. I was. But I respect it. I want to make it clear that I respect this body of work, and I realize that, you know, you guys are faced with tough decisions. And I appreciate all the hard work that you do put in. Rich did mention, and I don't take a lot of, you know, social media is social media. People like to get behind their computers and do what they do. But I think that if you went to a vote town-wide, I think it would overwhelmingly, it would be approved to slow this speed limit down. But that's just an opinion.
Right. So
you know, but you guys make the decision on what you want to do moving forward, and I respect that.
Thank you. So, three things now. One is we're in the middle of a vote. So just keep that in mind. Number two is, one thing that I like about this, Steve, is that we've been hearing so much about traffic across the town, cut-through streets, et cetera. And if you look at the whole package in terms of a contingent budget, we're talking about 1 or possibly 2 new patrolmen, which could help with traffic enforcement. The town administrator is submitting to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee for the first time variable speed limit boards, which you'll talk about tomorrow. And if we were able to lower the speed limit selectively in some places where we have a real problem on our hands, I think those three things working together actually could make a difference. I had Betty first.
So, following
I
up
had
on
a third thing, but I didn't get to it yet.
All right, following up
go
on
ahead.
Steve's point, do you have any sense of how many signs we're gonna have to replace, and could you give us a sense? I mean, I'm not expecting you to grab a number out of a hat, but what do you think the cost would be of replacing those signs?
Michael, in your former job,
So you're not really replacing the signs, you're just replacing the numbers on it?
Okay, so
the
what would
co-
be that?
I haven't estimated that. I could get you an estimate. You know, it's not every sign. Sometimes you just take, you know, I don't know what the regulations are for thickly settled neighborhoods. You know, every street light pole is 90 feet. I don't know how close in proximity the street signs are, but good question. I can get you that information.
I thought of my third thing. So the third thing actually pertained to something that you just said, Selectman Burns, about the popular vote if there were to go to the town. If the committee did vote to support this, if the Warrant Committee voted to support this, I don't know that I have enough information right now to write a really compelling comment. Because this is the type of change that I can see a lot of people getting concerned about in terms of either government crackdown or, you know, interfering with the status quo or changing their neighborhood. You know, things are working fine right now, and if the committee supports it, I would love to work with you just to get a little more information about, you know, what to put in that comment, and then I would recommend that Chief King speak to the article on town meeting floor.
yeah, I agree. I think that's a great idea.
Maggie.
Just the wording, I'd like to make a friendly amendment. I'd like to see not just the Board of Selectmen, but either the Chief of Police or the Traffic Commission, as far as they will be the ones that would be making, the establishing, you know, the roadways and choosing which ones. I'd like to see a joint effort, just not the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to see the traffic experts also involved in this article, that they make the decisions on the streets.
Chuck, are you willing to accept that friendly amendment?
I don't know. Who's on the I don't know who's on the traffic commission.
Chief of Police, or you can name the Chief of Police, you can name.
Chief of Police work for them. Didn't I recommend this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Chuck was the
didn't-
second.
I recommend.
Who was the second? You were the second. I'm sorry. you were the
I usually
article
am,
before.
but I'm not. So
Richard,
So,
I
it doesn't matter to me,
apologize.
What I would say is, so I don't know why that was created that way. Is
So,
that how it should be?
I just wanted, so it says that in Chapter 90, Section 17C of the Massachusetts General Laws, it's added Section 193 of Chapter 218 of the Acts of 2016, which does allow the Board of Selectmen to establish.
So we probably can't change that.
Yeah, so it wouldn't make sense, I would imagine.
But maybe in your recommendation, in your
Yes.
comments, you could say this is also supported.
Well, I can tell you, I don't think that we would do anything without
Yeah.
the recommendation of the police chief and the traffic commission. I think that that's how we operate. We want to get the most information and input from the people that do this stuff every day.
Just a comment, because I agree with Betty, the comment you said about knowing at some point what the cost is for them. But I mean, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm just going based off of thinking back and driving through the thickly settled areas of our town. I don't know that there's lots of speed limits on side streets. Usually they're on main roads. And so it seems to me the cost of this would be more on the entrances, or if you're gonna pick streets to add a number to. So I can't imagine we're talking, again, my opinion, you're talking massive amounts of money in 2018.
So, can I say one more thing? There are alternatives to reducing the speed, right? There are other traffic calming measures in place, right? You can raise intersections like you have on Thatcher Street, right? That costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to install it, costs a lot of money to repair it. You can do bump outs, right? When you get to the edge of an intersection, they bump that curb out, right? You lose parking, right? But it's to mitigate the pedestrians getting across the street. Adding dedicated bike lanes, things like that. That's slow. They're all traffic calming measures. This is a relatively inexpensive alternative to that.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Anything else before we vote? And just to be clear, you declined the friendly amendment because it didn't
Only
seem to
because
make
it
sense.
sounds like it goes against what the little law says.
They're not the traffic experts as
So
far as.
I'm not either, and I don't know who would
But
be.
it's still, it's their jurisdiction,
Yeah.
it's in their
It's in
domain
their
to do
purview.
this, not anybody else. The selectmen.
No,
He
but
just
they're
read
the
the
ones,
chapter.
are they going to now determine which streets without having the input of the traffic
They have a
commission?
traffic-
As I just mentioned, there is, you know, you're hearing it from me. There is no way our board would ever make a
Maybe another
determination.
board
with
might.
a-
But Maggie, the way that
like this is
the way
appropriate.
that the article is written, we're adopting an existing Massachusetts general law,
Right.
which allows the Board of Selectmen to do something. So the concern is that we don't have the ability to amend the recommendation to add in somebody else to work with them, because then that isn't adopting the law. That would be trying to change Mass general law.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I mean, that probably would have been a, yeah, it sounds great, but
Right.
it doesn't make sense in this instance.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to adopt the recommendation as written? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those opposed? 2, 8 to 2, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate all the work. Thanks
Thank
again
you.
for all your hard work.
Is Katie in the hallway?
I think she is, yeah.
Sorry, Katie.
I'm sorry.
As long as they don't talk.
I hear it, Chelsea, I should know. I'm joking. What is next?
Other Board of Selectmen articles.
Which one are we gonna do next?
Which one do you want to do next?
Seeing how we're on traffic.
I didn't get that.
We could do solar credits, traffic study.
Oh, all right, I thought it was one page. Because it's like, all right, this one sentence, it's just so big because it's in 18 languages. There she is.
Hi, would you like to join us at the table?
Mike, do you want to join me?
Sure, yeah.
You guys tagging in out there?
Yeah, you may have heard what happened. We weren't posted for a meeting, so we can't all join you at the table all at once, so we're coming in separately. We divided them up last night.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry to keep you waiting in the hall. So, you're here to talk about the Board of Selectmen sponsored articles that we have not yet voted. And do you have a preference as to which one we begin with?
No, whatever's your preference.
Okay. So, are you prepared to talk about the solar credit article now?
Yes.
Okay. Want to do that? Go ahead.
So the last time we presented, I believe it was Committee Member McCurdy and others that rightfully so called out some of the verbiage that was in there that asked the Consolidated Facilities Director, with the approval of the town administrator, to expend money from solar credits established in this revolving account only for town hall. right? Thank you for noting that. We did send it to town council. He came back with better verbiage, which I think we submitted to you. Am I looking at old information there?
Oh, is this the old one? I thought I had updated it.
Okay.
It
Oh, it
says-
does say any town building.
That's
Okay,
the new
great,
one.
yeah. And that was the idea, to take the solar credits from town hall building and to use them from the revolving fund for energy and any energy improvements on any town building. And then we were talking about total amount to limit. I believe I said about $400 a month. I talked to the Consolidated Facilities Director the following day. It's about $700 a month. So roughly, what's that, $8,400?
It's just under 10,000, and I recommended that, we use 10,000 since it's the first year, and we can establish it, and it gets revoted every year. They could move that number down a little, $2,000 next year, if that makes sense. But since the intention is to take all of the money out and use it for improvements, I didn't want to leave money trapped there since we don't have the exact figure.
And to your point, Mr. Chairman, trapped money there is just, we're seeing with the LED program, that the quicker we get those retrofit, the quicker we'll maximize our efficiency and costs from the town side. So there's no sense in letting that money sit there if we can use it for, saving on some energy bills.
Steve?
Yeah, the only thing that I maybe didn't state clearly enough is there can be the renewable energy credits earned on other town properties as well. So I wasn't looking to only limit the ones here to here, but, if they decide some new technology comes along that you can put on the roof of something that's not a solar wreck, but it's a wind wreck or something, who knows, in order that, all that money goes into the revolving fund and then can be used on any town building. If all of the town buildings get taken care of, and we might spend it on things at the schools. The schools have some panels on them. I assume you sell those racks? Or is that a
We
third
lease the
party? You
panels,
lease
so-
the panels, okay.
So we don't get the wrecks.
Gotcha, yep.
Discount.
But that, so in broadening it, I wasn't trying to just say only the recs
Only
from
these ones
town
here,
hall.
right.
But any town recs, the revenue could be used to do additional on any town property. That was my point.
So I misunderstood you, I apologize that. So it'd be any credits.
Any
for-
credits for.
For any building.
Right.
Right.
So,
And the way we had town council draw this up, because of my misunderstanding, was just these credits for this building and the solar panels.
right, yeah, presumably you're gonna do some more.
Right.
And then get some more. That was.
Yeah. And then it becomes literally a revolving fund, yeah.
So Steve, since there isn't a project, right now, we could amend this in the future when additional buildings come online, right?
They could. You could also, do the project and sell the recs too, just the revenue wouldn't go into that fund, it'll just go into the
Right,
general.
it goes to the general fund right
So
now.
it's not the end of the world.
Another option might be reopening and closing the warrant, not that we want to keep doing that, but we did that, we're meeting on Monday night, right before your meeting, so we could do that to substitute the article. That's what we did last night, was we reopened and closed to withdraw the planning board articles, withdraw and substitute the new ones, and withdraw a couple of the other articles. And we could do that again. We did that for this one, in order to put the new article in. So that would be an option if we wanted to bring the other buildings in at this time.
My only
Let's
reservation.
do a site walk of the panels too.
My only reservation with that is the limit, right? How long would it take us to quantify what all those
Yeah, well,
credits are worth?
because there is no established revenue stream for other projects, we probably would have to set the limit given what we know. So the limit would have to be increased in the future if another project was added. So that money could get stuck there for a year at max, I guess. Yeah, Richard.
Just a question of clarity. I agree. I mean, it makes sound decision. I mean, the thought. So But what's the amount, like the limit? Is there a reason, do you have to put in a
Yes.
limit? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, and this will eventually move into a table that's in the article. It might be like number 36 or something. I just showed it to Maggie, but we reauthorize all of these funds every year with new limits, and last year we reviewed them all, and we moved some up and some down to normalize them a little bit.
So, follow-up question. So if you made that change, are you saying that it's easy to change the limit?
Limit, yeah.
So it sounds like you'd have to amend a bylaw to do what Steve's asking, but
This
you're-
isn't a bylaw.
it's just a,
Just an article.
Right.
all right, I'm sorry, okay. So you'd have to amend it.
Yeah, because
Okay.
at some point you may want to amend this so that you can accept, gifts or grants or whatever, because, who knows? I don't know how the money will keep coming at the
Yeah.
renewable stuff.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Has the chair talked with town council about the recommendations? And I only ask that because on a call with him today, he indicated that he would be, because there's now a bylaw requirement, which was some confusion that was added through the Modernization Act, he indicated that the recommendation would need to include the bylaw.
He wrote this, I think, by bylaw. I think he added that in.
But he added it to the article or to the recommendation?
It's in both.
He definitely added it to the article, but what he told me this morning was that for these revolving funds, he was going to have to draft a recommendation that had bylaw language in it.
Because of the Municipal Modernization Act.
No, he didn't tell me that, and no, I just made this recommendation up myself.
Okay. It might be something that we should check with him, and since this is the establishment of the revolving fund, the limit can be revised at any year, it can be adjusted up or down.
Okay.
The amount of the expenditures, but if the committee wanted to address Steve's point and have it apply to revenues from, or sales of proceeds from all buildings, then it might be better to get that language now, so that then in future years, when it goes into that block article, it wouldn't have all this language in it, it would just have, the purpose. I think it would have to go through a separate article in a future year to amend the purpose of it.
Okay. So you want to take it back to the Board of Selectmen and see about expanding the scope a little bit? Opening and closing the warrant?
We could do that Monday night.
All right, and then we can look at this next Wednesday. You're going to be here on Monday, too?
Yes.
So we could look at it after your meeting on Monday. Okay. All right. Anything else on this?
Well,
Yeah,
if
Steve?
if you are going to reopen it, would it be worth discussing whether to, have the revolving fund able to accept gifts or grants? Because there are grants available to do renewable stuff, too. I mean, now I assume we apply for them, we get them, and we just spend the grant money. But, it could be camped in the revolving fund and not have to just disappear somewhere else.
Let me check with Bill Clark.
I mean, if it's too complicated
Bill,
and you
yeah.
just pass this, we'll live with that and then just change it somewhere down the line.
Anything else on this one?
No.
All right. Thanks, Katie. What about... Okay, this is the traffic control revolving fund, and so now you're telling me that probably town council needs to provide a recommendation
issue.
for this one too? That's a bummer. I just can't get the votes done. All right, so this is a proposed article that is new to this, relatively new to this group. Chairman Furs from the Planning Board spoke about it when he was here. The idea is that if a application comes before the Planning Board or the Board of Appeals, and for some reason there isn't a traffic study done, but they want to assess monies and receive them, they'd be able to put them into this fund and then use them down the road. It was Brian Furz's recommendation that the town administrator be responsible, with the approval of the planning board, for expending that money for various traffic studies and making traffic improvements. And do you want to add anything to that, either of you, that description?
I think you've covered it.
Yeah, okay.
We've submitted it, but it's at the request of the planning board chair.
So, any other questions on this one? Are folks generally, does this sound like a good idea to you? Do you have concerns?
Sounds too good to be true.
Oh, yeah. But this has been a pet peeve of Brian's for a while, because as a developer, I know that he's often required to make contributions to things like this for other towns that help with traffic mitigation and traffic studies. And given that he's a resident of Milton, he's wanted us to have a function like this, so.
Can anyone see a downside to this? I mean, it looks like a win-win for everyone.
Okay, I will check with John and see about potentially voting this next week, if I can get a recommendation from him. All right. Master plan appropriation.
Question, do you want to approve it and then just get it out of the way, and then if he doesn't have a change that has to be, that'll be done? And if he does, then we can reopen.
I think we'll dispense of it quickly.
Yeah, that's true. We'll dispense of it quickly.
Just an idea.
Yeah, I put it on the screen for you if you want to make a motion.
Oh, sorry, I thought they said if we got a change, we could dispense with it quickly. So, move to recommend as written.
Second.
Thanks, Betty. Discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, great. I will check with town council and see if we have to redo that. Do we want to talk about the master plan appropriation again? I think we've already covered it, and it really depends on how much free cash there is in a non-contingent scenario and what we're doing in a contingent scenario. But is there anything else to add to that?
I know you wanted to hear from the planning board, and at least at the meeting we had, we did have the chair of the master plan implementation committee here that night who spoke to it, but I think that's what you had told us, you wanted to hear the planning board's
I was
view.
just wondering if there's anything else. I'm running down the list.
Not that I'm aware of, unless there's anything that came out of that discussion.
No. We spoke with Tom earlier about the special purpose stabilization fund for the roads. That's also somewhat dependent upon the funding situation. So we didn't vote that one yet. And then you wanted to make some comments tonight, I think, about the traffic commission recomposition?
Yes, and I brought copies of the current draft for the group. I know that these were emailed out earlier.
That's the one we got this afternoon? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Copies for Mike, too.
You what? She's sending us.
I can summarize briefly what we're trying to accomplish here, and this has gone back out to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, to the police chief, and DPW director and others, some of whom have given us another round of comments, but others are still reviewing it, which is why I wanted to ask you to hold off on voting it. But what we're trying to accomplish here, and what I think I explained what happened before, was we were working off, because the bylaws that are on the town's website are updated through 2007. We were initially working off that and came to find out that a few years ago there were some amendments made to it that actually did add a resident to the Traffic Commission. And as a result, we've gone ahead and we've appointed Lee Toma, the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, to the Traffic Commission. But we'd like to add another resident, and we've updated a couple of titles. So we're changing the membership from 9 to 10. We're updating the title of the DPW director to take out town engineer. That's now a separate position. It used to be called the assistant town engineer, but it's now the town engineer. So we made those two updates to the titles. We've also updated the director of planning and community development's title. And rather than one resident, we've indicated 2 residents of the town, and we've specified at least one of whom shall be a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And that has come through the Master Plan Implementation Committee, which weighed in with some initial comments on this proposed bylaw. We've also added a paragraph stating that if any of these department heads, the police chief, the fire chief, DPW director, consolidated facilities director, or the planning director, if any one of them is unable to attend a meeting because they, at any given time, they're at multiple meetings a week, that they may designate a member of their department to participate and vote at that meeting. The expectation is that wouldn't happen very frequently, but we did, at the suggestion of the police chief and the DPW director, we did want to add in a provision that would not create quorum problems for the committees. I understand in the past the commission's had some trouble getting a quorum. They used to meet in the daytime. They're now meeting in the evening, so that may actually help the situation going forward. And then just back to earlier in section 2, we've bracketed consolidated facilities director. We want to have a follow-up conversation with the school department about that. which we have not yet done, but the Consolidated Facilities Director is on many committees, and it's really questionable whether his current role is relevant to traffic. And there may be a better person in the school department who would make sense to have on the commission, but that's a conversation we want to have with the school department. Section 4 is one of the major changes. We've changed the chair of the Traffic Commission. We're proposing that it be the Director of Public Works, and that was raised by the police chief, who indicated that, number one, in most communities, the Traffic Commission is chaired by a DPW director because a lot of the issues are engineering and not really enforcement related. And he felt that it could potentially be a conflict for his department where they're enforcing laws and residents are coming to them asking for traffic changes, and if they make the change, then they're also enforcing what they've changed. So he had some concerns about that he raised, that the town administrator and I thought made a lot of sense. The full board was in agreement with it, and the DPW director was comfortable with taking on this role. Some of the rest of it in sections 5 through 7 are really clarification changes to clarify a little bit what the role of the secretary is, to take out a couple of things that really may not necessarily be performed by whoever's not the administrative person supporting the commission, but we're talking about the person who would have the title of secretary, almost like the secretary of the Warrant Committee, which is different than the Warrant Committee clerk. It's to say oversee the preparation of meeting minutes, to delete things like supplying records and obtaining data, because that may be any other person on the commission who may provide some of those services. In number 6, we've just added in some additional references to the commission's mission, really, to be increasing public safety, reducing crashes rather than accidents. That was a request at a master plan implementation committee meeting. And then section 7 is really to just to indicate that the purpose of section 7 is to say that the selectmen really shouldn't be acting on traffic recommendations without a recommendation from the Traffic Commission. So any request for a change or a stop sign in a neighborhood or a one-way street, that should go to the Traffic Commission first, since they're the day-to-day professionals, rather than coming directly to the board. That was the original intent, and that's what it said. We're just clarifying it a little bit to take out that communications have to go through the secretary. The secretary could vary from year to year who's appointed secretary of the committee. So we're just saying it should be first submitted to the Traffic Commission, deleting secretary.
Chair Conlon, do you think that Section 7 would require the Board of Selectmen to seek the recommendation of the Traffic Commission before enacting the fundamental speed limit changes?
Oh, yeah, that would be, that would be the clear desire of the current board, and we talked about that recently, and the Board of Selectmen is a volunteer group. Everyone has day jobs usually. There have been retirees who've served in the past, but you're not always going to have someone with traffic expertise on the Board of Selectmen. So the membership's going to vary from time to time, and the day-to-day traffic management in the town, the people who have responsibility, like the engineering department and the police department and some of these other, the wire inspector, manager, which is the old title, manager of street and traffic lights, those are the people who should be weighing in first and foremost and advising the board on traffic. So the board, in my 4 years on the board, has never acted on a traffic issue without a recommendation from the Traffic Commission.
Thanks. And what about the situation with the potential replacement of the Consolidated Facilities Director with another school employee? How long do you think that is going to take to resolve? Are you going to be able to get this back to us next week?
I think so.
Yes.
We had some initial conversation and an email that went back and forth, and the chair of the school committee indicated that it may make sense to add someone else from the schools, but that they felt that the Consolidated Facilities Director probably serves that purpose well. So we haven't yet actually had a chance to speak about it, and the Consolidated Facilities Director does report to the superintendent, but also the town administrator, and he's on the Capital Committee, he's on the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, he's on a few other, so he's got a lot on his plate. And there was a real question among some of the members of the commission as to whether it's just taking up a lot of his time to sit through a traffic commission meeting on issues that really aren't relevant to what his department does. So that's a conversation that we want to have.
Did you discuss
further with him and also with the school department?
Did you discuss potentially having a school committee member, or do you think it should be somebody that is a staff member?
We know that they have a policy committee, preferably staff, I would think,
okay.
But we just haven't had a chance to have a follow-up conversation.
Yeah, I did miss a call from Superintendent Gormley and Glenn Pavlicek that I will catch up on tomorrow.
What other questions do people have on this traffic commission? Yes, Maggie?
Again, I think it's a great idea. I did look up this previous, the bylaw and also the people that were elected before, but I think there's one other person that you didn't reappoint when you appointed the chair of the bicycle committee that was supposed to have been on this from 3 years ago.
And who is that, Maggie?
I don't have that person's name here, but it wasn't, that it was a specific title that was supposed to be appointed to this if someone has the old traffic commission makeup.
It could be Jack Calabro.
Oh, yeah, maybe, I think that, what
Might be
is
the
he?
wire
the-
Wire
Inspector,
inspector?
yeah.
That's the old title. So what was changed a few years ago, it was to update that to manager of street and traffic lights and special DPW/engineering projects.
No, but I think there was one person that you did not appoint when.
Like a citizen?
Yes, not a citizen, there's still someone that was supposed to be on this board from 3 years ago from this article that wasn't appointed. And he worked for the town. I can look it up, it's not a big deal, but I think it's a great article, but you said that the police chief has seen this and he's on board and he agrees with this. If the police chief agrees with this, I think it must be a good measure, but I'd like to see either some of the public safety personnel's comments that make up the traffic commission now, or have them come back when we vote on this on Monday and get some comments from them.
Is there someone in particular you're interested
No,
in
I'm
hearing?
just
Because we've
saying-
spoken with several of them.
Or maybe you can forward to us their comments and,
Well, the chair right now is the chief of police.
right,
And
maybe he could come in?
Does he support this article?
Yes.
He does.
He was going to review the latest draft, but yes, we discussed many of these changes with him.
And does DPW support being the new person in charge? Not
You
that it
said he
matters.
did, right? You said he did.
There were some comments, late emails today, based on the latest version that Chair Conlon had sent out.
So would we be able to review those comments prior to voting on this?
Or if there's any controversy that you want us to be aware of,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
what I would ask for.
Right.
I mean, if there's any discord among the current members of the traffic commission, I'd ask you to bring it forward, but it sounds like everybody's on board with the change. It doesn't seem controversial at all.
One of the groups we've sent this to is the Master Plan Implementation Committee, which has no role in this, but
Right.
does have is having a lot of discussions about traffic issues, and so it's gone to the full membership, and we'd like to give them a little bit of time to review the latest draft. They did have some initial feedback,
One more thing.
which is reflected in here.
I mean, I think it's a great, I mean, we need to do this now, but on bylaws, now, maybe you can help me understand. Do we have to put specific roles and duties, like the secretary shall arrange? And then, is this gonna cost the town any more money, and how are they gonna oversee all of this paperwork and getting minutes out to people and all of this other additional responsibilities? Is this gonna cost money, even though it says they're not gonna be paid, but all of their expenses will be paid? How does this different than the way it was before, I guess?
So currently, there's an administrative person in the police department who does work with the traffic commission and does a lot of the administrative work for the traffic commission, with the chairmanship and the communications flowing over from police to DPW. That would become a responsibility of the DPW, but the town administrator is looking at other options in terms of administrative staffing for the commission. So
You mean
that
like
would be
paying
handled
someone?
outside of the bylaw. That the bylaw is intended, the changes we're looking to make are to add a resident to the traffic commission and to update some of the titles and consider whether the current membership makes sense, which is what we did a few years ago, and also to deal with the chairmanship issue that the police chief felt was an important topic. We were not looking to wholesale rewrite it, especially where it was revised a few years ago, but to make those key changes. There's a lot that the traffic commission, a lot about the traffic commission that would be addressed outside the bylaw as well. And separately, we've had the traffic commission for the past several months, meeting at night, rather than during the daytime, and meeting at town hall rather than in the basement of the police station. So there are changes, those have been made outside of the bylaw.
Chuck?
I have two stupid questions. So, why is it crashes instead of accidents? Crashes sounds very informal. I don't know. Is there a special reason?
I'm trying
So
to-
in my history in Boston, the cycling community, and distracted driving, people that don't appreciate distracted driving, don't consider a crash an accident.
An accident makes it sound like there was no fault.
right?
And do you increase public safety or improve public safety?
Increase access to problems.
It just didn't sound grammatically correct to me.
Let's see, section 6?
Section 6.
Third line.
Relieving?
I was gonna say, instead of regulate traffic in the town and improve public safety, instead of, do you increase public safety? I'm not an English major, it just sounded off to me.
We can certainly bring that change back to everyone who's
Sorry,
doing
it's
it.
stupid, not important, just
I
a
like
little nit.
improve.
We've
Yes.
talked about grammar at town meeting, I just didn't want to get on this.
Bill?
I only have one stupid question. 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, at the annual town meeting, Peter Mullen, the town meeting member, rose and suggested that the size of the traffic commission was too large. And he gave some reasons that I don't quite recall at the moment. You've added to it, it's now 10. Was there any discussion about the appropriate size of the commission in terms of it being a nimble, get things done type
There
group?
was, we don't want it to be too large that it's unwieldy, but in looking through the positions that are, leaving the residents aside, the positions that are here, the one that we really questioned was the Consolidated Facilities Director. The others, the manager of streetlights is relevant, that role is very relevant to traffic. It's felt that the fire chief is a critical voice to have on the traffic commission. The police and DPW, we felt were very important. The safety officer is additional police support, but that position was viewed as being active at the traffic commission. So we were a little bit concerned about the size of it, but when we talked among ourselves with Chief King, with DPW Director Lynch, the feeling was that most of these positions really do make sense to be on the traffic commission.
It seems like allowing designees might help with the nimbleness as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're not voting this, right?
No, sir.
Thank you.
If you think about it, it's
It's
gonna
a little
be hard
messy.
for the town engineer to contradict his boss, or for the police officer, safety officer to contradict his
Yes.
boss, so it's
Yeah.
a little bit stacked in terms of, if someone comes up with an opinion, it's, I don't know.
You're saying what, the safety officer is not necessary?
Well, the police chief represents the police, the DPW represents DPW, and then you've got, another safety officer for police, the town engineer who reports to DPW, it just gets manager of streetlights. Sort of,
That's what we're working on. Thank
it's
you.
one voice duplicated.
Yeah. How are they?
We're happy to talk with the chief and the DPW director again about those.
Okay. Any other questions for Katie or Michael on this? No? Okay. I don't think that there are any other Board of Selectmen sponsored articles that you were supposed to speak on tonight, are there?
I don't think so.
There's one more I want to ask you about while you're here,
I'll
but
just go through them. What was the other one?
I'd like to get your feedback on the fire space, the fire station needs.
I understand, it has not come back to our board. I understand it's been before the capital committee. I don't know where they're at with it.
No, no do I, no. It
I know
wasn't-
where the capital committee is.
Wasn't on their recommendation.
It didn't, they didn't recommend any money for it.
Right.
And there's, what?
We haven't voted it yet. He's coming tomorrow. Steve Marash is coming tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Do you think there's the possibility you'll add $2 million potentially? Oh, would it be, it would be bonded, right? You and I had this conversation that it was going to be tough to bond it because it has a
It's going to
5-year.
have to be over 5 years because there's no project attached to it yet.
Okay, so you're discussing this tomorrow, it sounds like. So, all right, so probably no change from the last time we checked in with you.
Not at our board, no.
Okay. Because it's a big, I'm wondering, do the boards in town want the warrant committee to recommend this bylaw if it has zero funding? Or does that not help anybody? Yeah, so anyway.
We held off on putting it on our agenda, and as I think I said when I was here last, I'm going to recuse myself on that article, but the board hasn't, it has not been on our agenda because it's been referred to the capital committee. So until it goes through that process, we do have a meeting Monday night. I suppose we could add a brief discussion about it if the capital committee will have taken a position at that point.
All right. I'd appreciate some feedback from the other two Board of Selectmen then, because if this doesn't have any funding, I don't know that it has any teeth, because they are looking to spend money, but maybe they're able to get additional grants or funding from somewhere else, and it does help them to keep moving forward. And I'd just love to hear what Tom and Dave have to say about it. Yes, Richard?
Can I bring up a question?
Anything.
Anything?
Yeah.
I do have one question. I don't know, I don't want to throw it at you, so if you don't have an answer for it today, but, so in the spirit of, so when folks ask us, when we're not in the meeting, about things that involve money and when I don't know, or if we hear about it just in the paper, there's a reason why I sent Lee Michael a question today I wanted to ask you about. So we read in the paper about the waiving of funds for the Ford Ranch and you getting money for what was the fund called?
Affordable Housing Trust?
Affordable housing. So can you talk about that, just because I don't think that we've ever talked about that, and I know that especially when, in times of, looking for money, I just want to see what the talk was about that. Is that something you normally do? Is that something that you're going to be doing in the future?
I'm happy to address it if
Yeah.
you'd like. It is not something we would normally be doing. It's not something we normally have done. The Board of Selectmen waived $80,000 approximately in permit fees for the Ford Ranch Road development, which is a proposed development of 10 houses. This is a project that, going back many years, I think 2012 timeframe, there was a proposal by the owner of the property to develop 3 homes. It's I think rough numbers, a 15-acre property, and there was an issue regarding the use of a driveway off of Hillside Street. The matter went to the planning board for an approval not required. It was a tie vote, 2-2 at the planning board, which meant that the proposal failed. Following that, and there was opposition from the immediate abutters. The wider neighborhood was not involved in it at that stage. There was a lot of litigation that followed. The case went up to the appeals court. I think there were 2 cases, actually, that were filed. And there was a lot of discussion among the neighborhood, the wider neighborhood, not just the immediate abutters, but the Scotts Woods District and the Greater Hillside Neighborhood Association. And after a long period of time, including various members of our board, usually whoever was the chair in a given year, talking to Mr. Hamilton, who was the developer, and talking with the neighborhood and trying to really bring the parties together to see if the developer and the neighborhood would sit down and work out some kind of a solution. That took a long time, but different members of our board over time really tried to bring the parties together. That eventually did happen, and there's support for the neighborhood for the 10-house development. There were much larger proposals, 75 townhouses at one point, then a lower number of townhouses. There was potentially a much larger development for that site. It's a complicated site because it requires the building of a little bridge over some an intermittent stream or some kind of wetland area. So there's a proceeding before the Conservation Commission. The neighborhood agreed to support the 10-house development, and some of the neighbors invested in purchasing one of the lots to try to settle the matter. So they actually have some skin in the game, and it has not yet, it may have since we've waived the fees, but as far as I know, there had not been a filing with the planning board for a special permit. There was a proceeding that went through the Conservation Commission, but there were some discussions between the planning board and the developer and his attorney. And the planning board, under the new cluster zoning bylaw, there's an affordable housing requirement. The planning board was asked what its view would be on the Affordable Housing Trust. And after a lot of discussion, the planning board felt that they would require a range of $80,000 to $100,000 be deposited into the Affordable Housing Trust in lieu of building an affordable unit. That was going to add a lot of extra expense for the developer, who has already spent a lot of time on litigation, spent a lot of money on alternative plans and litigation. So the developer's attorney came to us and asked if we would consider fee waivers in order to make this 10-house development work. And members of the neighborhood association supported it, and we agreed to do it in order to get the development done after years of delay and a lot of expense by both sides. The neighborhood raised a lot of money as well to so that their interests would be represented. And in order to get the project moving, get it to the planning board, hopefully get it permitted, and get the development built, and bring in roughly $200,000 of tax revenue each year, which is what the property is expected to generate. So we've waived, there are different elected boards that sit in different positions, and for various reasons take the old expression, sometimes where you sit determines where you stand. Our board looked at it as we tried bringing the neighbors together. We thought it was in the best interest of the town and the neighborhood to get the development built and not go through more protracted back and forth between the developer and the neighbors, and maybe a more dense development that might go in that site, which should have been 3 houses already built and paying and generating tax revenue. So that's why we made that decision, and we tried to really explain that on the record, and members of the neighborhood association supported the developer's request. So that's the reason that we waived it.
I appreciate the background. No, that's great context. I knew, obviously, there's the other side, you only get one piece from the paper. I didn't watch that viewing of the selection meeting. But, for the reason why I ask is when we're looking at some new projects coming in, I would imagine the folks that are on the warrant committee looking forward will be thinking, okay, we probably got some fees coming in. And so I just didn't know if it was something that was normal practice. But I make sense in this circumstance, so thank you.
And the good news is we'll have money flowing into the Affordable Housing Trust, which there is a real need for.
Yep.
So it's almost a wash in that sense.
So it sounds like there are no other questions on the articles, Phil? Or what's your question, Phil?
I just asked Katie for an update on Henry's.
The good news is the planning board and the conservation commission approved the applications, so a special permit has been issued. We have not yet, unless Mike's got an update, I don't think we've seen the written order of conditions from the conservation commission. So I think it was February 14th when the Conservation Commission voted unanimously to support the notice of intent, but they are going to have to issue that in writing, and then there's an appeal period once the decision's filed with the town clerk. So as far as we know, that hasn't yet, the written opinion hasn't yet been filed, and that sets up a timeline for us in which, once the appeals period's run, that's when we have, our MOU has some dates built into it for the transfer of the town property to the developer. So all of that will get triggered, and then the demolition responsibilities will kick in. It's all, I don't have it with me, but there's a time frame for all of that in the MOU. So, but we're just waiting for the written order of conditions and the appeals to run.
Will the town be responsible for any demolition costs?
Not demolition costs, no.
Okay.
We did agree to pay for the MBTA diversion during the demolition period. So we will have that, but not the demolition itself, the
Will that be
developer.
in this coming fiscal year?
We hope so, yeah.
Where would the money come from?
The reserve fund, the money that we're holding in the reserve fund.
We have
How much? are we holding?
395, I
almost
think.
$400,000.
Is it really?
395 and change.
It won't, that was based on the demolition cost, so this would be a smaller amount.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, there's no chance that it's coming down by July 1st, right?
There is a chance.
chance?
that-
Yes, yep.
There is, yes. Fingers crossed.
Because that creates a situation for the warrant with reauthorizing that money for fiscal year 18. But if the money is spent already, then we'll have to do a pink sheet, right? At town meeting, if the building is going to come down between town meeting and
Yes.
July 1st.
If it's a smaller amount. Yes, we did talk about transferring, as we did last year, transferring the set aside from this year's reserve fund to next year's reserve fund if needed.
All right, let's talk about that again later. Anything else on, anything except for the budget? Contingent budget? No? All right, so I guess we're done with the articles then. May we take a 5-minute break? And then do about a half an hour on the budget, maybe?
Thank you very
5-minute
much.
recess? Thanks, Katie. Everybody, welcome back, Michael and Amy. So we're going to switch gears now and talk about the contingent budget for a little bit, maybe about a half an hour. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting last night. You guys got some good feedback and some direction on the prioritization, which was great, and you're here to chat about that, and then hopefully we can move into some deliberations.
Sure. So the sheet that everyone has, I think, what we did would, first and foremost, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Again, I think Selectman Burns said it, and Selectman Conlon and Selectman Hurley, but again, thank you for your effort and your dedication. It's been a long process. I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Again, we had a very productive meeting at the Board of Selectmen last night. What you'll see in this sheet is we reprioritized some of our Tier 1 numbers, positions, expenditures, materials, and you'll see it. Town Accountant Amy Dexter has done a great job. What you'll see on the left-hand side of it is where we prioritized them last week. Second column is this week, and then the second column is where it was last week, based on the discussions that we had with the Board of Selectmen. I think the other...
Sorry, so the first column is the current recommendation?
Is current, yeah. Column B would be where we were last week.
Thank you.
So it's much more refined. It's much more concentrated. I think you see a good mix between all of the town departments. I think you see, and I can run some numbers for you. Amy did a great job with the second to last column, column I, or column J, which does a running total for us and for you, which I found very useful today when we finalized it. So basically, if you take position 1 and position 2 in Tier 1, that 106,857 is the aggregate of them, and it proceeds down that column.
Yep.
So that gives you a playing field, if you will. I will stress that for those of you that didn't see it last night, we were looking for prioritizing public safety. I think if you take this math down to number 16, that 889092 number, 21% of that is public safety. 189,408. And I'm just throwing numbers out there to just talk about what the goals and objectives were in the redefining of that list through our discussion with the Board of Selectmen. We talked about efficiencies in town. There are some positions and some funding that do improve the efficiency of the town. I think when you take what we saw with the Capital Improvement Committee tonight and the words from Tom and Amy about how old the fleet is, I think that mechanic position gets moved up. It's something that we find that can instantly improve some of the inefficiencies in the town. So if you take that same number 16 total of 889092, about 38% of the numbers in our priorities 1 through 16 address efficiency and some of, I won't call it low-hanging fruit, but just some redundancies in the town that could be looked at and we could maximize some savings there. I think you see a good mix of consolidated facilities work, the work that Bill Ritchie and his group do. They completely maximize the dollar for the town. That licensed craftsman we prioritized last week. We, Board of Selectmen, also hold that to be very important. We actually moved that $100,000 up from the work that his group does because, as Tom Hurley said last night, most line departments no longer have a repairs and maintenance line. That went the way of the dinosaurs some time ago. So that will also maximize some of the efficiencies in the town. The Chief Procurement Position Officer, which wasn't here last week, you heard from the Town Government Study Committee. I watched a bit of that testimony on Monday. That's a needed position in town. It's mandated by state law. I'm currently the chief procurement officer because we don't have one. They talked about the new software system that's in town and the need to create purchase orders and follow money through the software system, through encumbrances and appropriations. That's what we envision with this position here. Very multitasking, work closely with myself and town accountant. But as we go through the list, you'll see different departments and different parts of town government that we feel, whether you put a body in there or some funding towards services that have made our tier one, and the Board of Selectmen's discussion last night as well. If you want to go through each one by one, or Amy, do you want to add any comments before we?
The only thing I'd add at this point is right on that line that you have highlighted, I noticed I missed the .5. It's a .5 FTE, that's part-time. So that changes the number down on tier 1 to 4 part-times and 11 FTEs if the full tier 1 were requested.
Phil?
Yeah, just a question on item number 15 and item number 23. Are both for the same thing. Is that to add an additional 25,000 as a different priority?
No, we split it in half. It was 50,000.
Okay.
Oh, I think Phil's talking about why are they different, right?
Well, it was originally 50,000 one line item.
Okay.
So just from different priority.
So you want us to
Well,
consider
we
them as
thought-
separate priorities, is that it?
Right, I think the line of thinking there was maybe we could fund something, but maybe 50,000 maybe wasn't the amount.
Okay.
We could also maybe augment that a little bit with free cash. Put 15 of free cash towards it.
Right, so we're trying to recognize that it's important, but trying to get creative of ways to not completely eliminate something from the priority.
Can we talk about row 13 for a few minutes? I don't feel like we have as much of a justification for this position as we have for some of the other ones. I'm not sure that the case has been built for this one. I know that Selectman Burns spoke pretty strongly for the position last night at the meeting, but this hasn't been presented to the Personnel Board yet, and I just don't have a clear picture of the need, and so this one is in the question mark category for me.
So Town Clerk Susan Galvin was scheduled to present. She has presented to the Personnel Board one time. They asked for some additional information. She was scheduled to present again this week, and the meeting ended up falling through because they couldn't get a quorum. But she is on, she's trying to get in front of that board to get this finalized.
Maggie?
But I'm kind of in agreement with you. But I have a couple of other things on number 10, selectmen.
Maggie, before we move on, would you mind if I asked a follow-up question on that
Oh, no.
position?
No.
I'm just wondering do you have some bullet points off the top of your head as to why this position is needed and what the person would do?
I think Ms. Galvin would be better off, but I can certainly share some conversations I've had, and maybe Michael can do the same. I mean, one of the, I believe years ago, she had an extra person in that, and through cuts along the way, that may have been eliminated. But with the recent appointment of Records Access Officer, is that what you call it?
Yes.
She's now that point person. All FOIA requests or Freedom of Information Act requests go through her office. So for instance, if you email me and ask me for something, I need to email it to her, and she needs to disseminate it, because often she needs to track it all, but also to make sure it gets to the proper party. We now have 10 days, I believe, to respond, so the deadlines are tighter. So I think that's put an extra burden. I believe the hospice, the Seasons Hospice has significantly increased the amount of deaths in town, which has also put some additional work on her office. Bylaws, trainings, things like that. I mean, she'd be the better person to speak, but these are the kind of things is her
You're reminding me,
office.
she did mention most of those things when we
Yeah,
had her
there's a
in
lot
here.
of different things that
I'm just concerned.
Selectively.
I'm concerned about the total number of FTEs, and several other warrant committee members mentioned that last week. And the way that the prioritization is structured now, we didn't get a lot of FTEs towards the bottom of the list. So if we start cutting up from the bottom,
Well,
it would take us a long time before we start affecting positions.
So that's because if you look at the town's request, I mean, we're trim on the personnel, and there's not a lot of big items that aren't.
Is there any possibility
are
of
needs.
sharing a position between, Michael, your as of yet to be decided selectman position and the town clerk position? Does there make any sense to have a full-time person that splits their time between those two positions?
First time I heard it, but my initial reaction is sure. Yeah.
Chair Conlon, it's an unfair question to Michael in a way because he hasn't been in his position a lot, and the whole Board of Selectmen spoke really passionately about the need for this additional position in the Selectman's office, which used to be there. And before we go any further with, do you have any initial reaction to potentially sharing that position? You think there's enough work in the Selectman's office for a full FTE for sure, and is it just dead in the water, or do you think it's an idea worth pursuing?
Jump back after this. We think there's a need for resources for the strong town administrator, who's now got some additional duties that the town administrator didn't always have. You know, hiring and staffing decisions really are something that we've kind of transferred to the town administrator. So we want to defer to his judgment, but we also know that the prior town administrator was doing more than one job for a long time, and that there were a lot of issues that she didn't have adequate staffing in the office. And as we said the other night, 15 years ago, the selectman's office had a greater number of staff than has been the case in the last few years. So I think what you heard our board saying last night was we think there's a need for additional operational help for the town administrator. He's only been on the job for a few months, so he's still assessing what the needs are in the office. And I think we want to defer as much as possible to what his judgment is as to what level it should be, what the title should be. Is it more professional? Is it more administrative? What are the actual needs? So we just recognize that there's a lot that's the office is called upon to do, and we're concerned about the resource level, but I think we'd probably want to give Mr. Dennehy some time to consider that. Does a part-time position make sense? And that's probably not something he can answer at the table tonight. He's probably going to want to consider it. So that's really all I can add. We really do want to try to transfer staffing decisions to the town administrator and away from the board.
Okay. I was really looking for your opinion since he's new on the job, in
I
case you
know.
had some historic.
Yeah.
But the board was really strong in making sure that he didn't take this off the priority list. So, you know, I'm maybe suggesting something that's contrary to what the board had in mind last night, so I just wanted to see what your opinion to that was. Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, our subcommittee had talked to the town clerk about that position, and I recall that she said with the hospice, there's a lot more paperwork to do, and that that this records requirement was a burden that was just additional unfunded mandate. The bylaws had come up, and there was a question about whether that could be done, if you could hire some temporary help to take care of that, rather than have someone on staff. Is that a possibility to maybe get those things done that we need to get done, but one of them is a project that's one and done kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm open to everything. To Katie's point, it's been 4 months. I feel like I have a very good pulse of what goes on in the building, and my point last night, for those of you that didn't hear me, was I would rather make sure that the Council on Aging or DPW or one of the line departments that sometimes gets overlooked and underfunded, make sure that they get what they need to do out on the street, what the constituency is probably looking for on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate their support for the office. It is a very busy place, but so I will agree with Katie that it's a little early for me to, make a judgment as to, who needs that half a body more, You know, that's a good idea, Mike, that some of that work can be done, not with an FTE or even a part-time employee. So,
Steve has a question?
A comment more than a question, but as an interim step, allowing the town clerk to get a sense for how much real additional work comes from public records law changes, so we have like additional time to see who can do what in his office, but still have more help than he's got now, and keep the FTE count down. I think that a shared spot makes a lot of sense, shared position.
Yeah, Phil?
Which position are you talking about sharing?
The senior administrative clerk in the town clerk's office.
With?
And the to-be-determined position, line number 10, in the selectman's office, which used to be an assistant town administrator position, but now is being reconsidered.
Okay. But one is an $84,000 position, and the other is a $42,000 position. That sounds like two totally different
Yeah.
skill sets,
They're not sure.
That's a really good point.
you know?
Yeah.
Wasn't that 84 cut by 20,000 when he was?
I think it was higher.
it was,
yeah.
I was gonna try to make it an HR assistant.
Took some,
yeah.
we already took some savings off of
20,000 or
that.
something, right?
It probably would not make sense to have, yeah, I think that's a good point. All right. Maggie?
Well, that was one of the questions about reducing it to 20,000, because I remember you
Right.
talked about that, and we thought that was a great idea. And you also stated that you'd like to see other departments that are being left out. Well, why did the conservation agent go from number 6 to 19 when 37% cost to the general fund, and they still don't have anyone to answer phones full-time? With this conservation agent, they would be allowing the DPW to have a full-time admin. It's nice that all departments want to add admin. How about just giving a department that is so large a full-time admin support?
So the idea with the conservation agent is that would be a shared resource with ourselves and Randolph Town Administrator, Dave Murphy, myself
Yes.
had a conversation.
So are you not going to let the DPW have a full-time administrative person?
I think we were hoping, tier one is tier one. I don't think we were hoping
Yeah, I
it
mean,
wouldn't get funded.
this is still tier one,
Well, yeah, I know, but
the whole
I guess
page.
I'm just
He
not, I'm
also
not
has-
following.
We had to move things down to move things
if
up.
we're going to be cutting positions, as you had mentioned earlier,
Yep.
you said we're going to start from the bottom up, correct?
Well,
If we wanted to cut positions.
Okay.
if we want to cut and if we want to follow the town administrator's recommendation
Okay.
on the prioritization, we're seeking his input. And the input of the Board of Selectmen.
That's
Are you
all,
good for now?
thanks. Yeah.
Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had another
That's
question.
all right. This was something I brought up with Chief Grant the other night, but he came in and made a very emotional and passionate pitch for more people, but didn't ask for more people, just for some additional hours. Was there any more discussion of that last night as to, you know, bringing on another firefighter as part of this rather than just hours?
No,
Okay.
What else? Yes, Bill?
You had a discussion with us at a meeting 1 or 2 meetings ago about calling backfill staffing wages, which used to be referred to as overtime, is now called backfill staffing wages. Would that money be used for straight time, or would it be used for time and a half?
time and a half,
So, all right, okay.
yeah. Yeah, if you call in sick and we bring Chuck in, or you use accrued time and Chuck has to come in, I think the collective bargaining agreement.
So the time and a half aspect of it means that essentially it's probably not a lot different than the cost of adding a firefighter, even with 30% benefits added to it.
Yeah, so kind of to follow up what Steve had, we had a very brief discussion with Chief Grant today about he had touched upon in his quick back-of-the-envelope math about figuring out where that balance is, that happy balance with, and he thought in his preliminary numbers weeks ago that he might be able to fund, I think, 3 firefighters, not lieutenant, not deputies, stuff like that, but just guys on the trucks, guys or girls on the truck with not costing the town anymore. And he's going to look at that. He's going to look deeper into that. It would be a net net zero for that perspective.
But more personnel, which is
Yes,
really what's the
yeah.
important part.
But he has to refine those numbers and asked today if we should follow through on that, so.
I think I have only Chuck, right?
And maybe you know in just your group, Amy and Mike, is it, I think it's important for us to know, like, of these positions, which are which is new and which is restoring, because that's a,
Positions that were cut in the past.
yeah, it's a different, I think there's a big difference between, well, that was cut, 4 years ago when we haven't had an override for 8 years. I'm not asking you to do it now, but that might be a column, new. The inspectional services person is new, I think. That wasn't a cut. But if there was a deputy clerk and he or she was not let go or they retired and they weren't filled, I think that would be helpful to us.
If it was more than 10 years ago, is it still relevant?
No, I would say between the last override and today.
Okay.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
We were just
So
brought
8.
up that the selectmen's office had
that's fine.
a lot more people 13 years ago, so that's still relevant.
With technology now, that helps, so you can do more with fewer people.
Other questions for Amy and Michael on the list? I have looked over this tier 2, and I don't think that there's anything that I want to make a passionate plea to move up. I think the right things are in tier 1, and I think that based on the discussion we had the other day, we probably need to have a conversation about moving up from the bottom here, or potentially taking out something. If somebody thinks that hiring both patrolmen over one of these things down here is a bad idea, or I'm open to any conversation on the list. We do not have to accept the prioritization as suggested by the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. We're free to have a discussion about any of this that we wish, recognizing that I think we've said in the past, none of this is unnecessary. All of this is necessary, but we want to get to a palatable number where we think the town runs, but we're being really fiscally as tight as possible.
It's just a small
Maggie?
item. Tier 3 looks like a duplicate request for 15,000 of planning. I think you had asked that question before, and I don't think we've gotten clarification on it yet.
Yeah, that, where is it? Planning.
Tier 3
That's
first.
2021.
It is duplicative of the master plan implementation committee request. So what Chair Furr said was that if that money is put into the master plan, then we don't need to worry about this request. Okay.
Same with the restoration of the permanent records, which is way down the bottom of,
Yeah.
right? If that gets funded through capital, that's why that's so far down.
Mm-hmm.
And that 20,000 comes.
Yeah, a few things landed down here, just like on the schools list, where they're going to end up with free cash under one of the budget scenarios. Okay.
So when do we know if that gets approved?
What did you say?
When do we know if that gets approved?
What's
And
that?
then If,
The
these.
free cash?
Yes.
We have it on our schedule next Wednesday to talk about free cash, or maybe it's Monday. We have it on the schedule Monday to talk about free cash. What'd you say?
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. And Wednesday, I'm sure. We'll probably talk about it both days. So let me refer you to the worksheet that I made. I think with the new Tier 1 prioritizations from the school and non-school departments, the amount of potential override that we were looking at for just Tier 1 has gone up a little bit. It's now 3.998. So what I have here is column F are the Tier 1 requests from all the departments. Column G right now is mirroring column F. That's where we would make our changes if we want to add or subtract things. And then column H will calculate what the new warrant committee contingent budget is. So the last highlighted cell in column H shows what the potential override would be under that scenario. So right now, if we were to accept all of the Tier 1 requests, I think the override, if my math is correct, comes to 3.998.
2 or 3?
3.998. That's with restoring the 1.5 million that we cut from the non-contingent budget. So it was sounding like the other night that 3.8 was perhaps unpalatable to folks, and I'm wondering where we are tonight given the revised Tier 1 list that we got from Michael, and if we can start removing some stuff off from the bottom going up and get that number down, or if there are other positions that folks would like to talk about even higher on the list that you think are candidates for coming off.
Okay.
Yes, Richard.
Are we going to be going through this again Wednesday, or are we going through it now?
We can go. I want to. Oh, you want to stop the meeting?
Well, so I think this is going to take a while.
It is
scheduled for Monday for this?
We are scheduled for Monday. There's still a few. What'd you say? There's still a few straggling Board of Selectmen articles that we have to talk about again, and then the Blue Hills are presenting.
Does Blue Hills have to come in?
Is
it like a bill?
I did get them down from an hour to 30 minutes. So, I mean, it's $1 million expenditure for the town. It makes sense.
But it can't change, right? It is kind of is what it is.
They need to make a specific request of the town. They have a massive building campaign that they're about to embark upon, and we need to hear the information that they're bringing forward to us.
If enough towns reject their budget request, then they have to permit that.
I didn't want it to realize. I just figured this is going to take a long conversation.
It is going to take a long time, but I don't want to keep deferring it. I guess, do you feel like you have all the information you need to have from Michael Dennehy at this point to be making your decisions, or is there anything else that you need? It would be great if Jack had anything further to tell us about those positions.
Sure.
If anything happens, when's the next time that the Personnel Board is meeting?
I don't know.
No, probably not between now and Monday, but that would be
No.
nice to know if there was any change there. Phil?
No, I was just going to say, the question that someone raised to have you look at your priority list in terms of what might be restorations would be very helpful, I think, for me.
Okay, that's good new information, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could go through most of the list.
I think the two police officers are.
Right.
I mean, they've been
The
unfunded
Code
for
enforcement
a long
officer is a
time.
no. Patrolman, yes, right? And licensed craftsman, consolidated facilities was only developed 2 years ago,
That's
right?
new, yeah.
So that's a new one.
This one would be restoring too, because I think,
Master mechanic might be a restore.
let's ask on that one, but.
I'll check on the master mechanic.
Might be a restore.
Yeah, I think it is.
He's had one before.
Chief procurement officer is not, that's new state legislation. Outreach coordinator is a bit of a reorg. They have one now?
They have an outreach worker. So they're reorging to eliminate the outreach worker position, hire an outreach coordinator, which I believe would be a licensed
Social worker.
social worker, and to pay that position 100% out of the general fund, whereas the outreach worker was partially or significant amount paid out of the grant fund. But we could ask Council on Aging, because she had mentioned there might be a possibility to get this amount down a little bit.
Did they lose the grant?
No.
They're going to use it for something else?
Well, they
Yes.
could possibly transfer part-time van driver and
Driver
pay
into
that
that.
out of the grant. So this number could potentially come down, but we would have to talk to Mary Ann Sullivan about that.
Okay.
Just to
I
go
don't think
back,
that's a lot of money.
Right.
It might be like 15,000 that it could come down possibly.
Reference tech.
back up to number 8, yeah, the reference technology librarian. A technology librarian, I think the library industry is shaping, but the fact that they put reference there, and there were more libraries in the town, I would make a guess that this is an old position, albeit the duties and responsibilities has been redefined, right? Senior admin clerk, that's the one we started this conversation on, we'll check on that one.
I think that might be a restoration, but I'm not sure it would be at the same level. But she mentioned she used to have more people in the, not her, but the former town clerk had more help. I don't know how many years ago, though.
Patrolman, we talked about, right? the labor for the Parks Department, I'd be hard pressed to believe that's not a restoration of a position.
So how do we find out whether they
You're gonna check for us.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah,
check.
you're gonna check.
Yeah, public
It's been in the
health,
budget, I mean, that's been approved for a while.
they have some now. How's that sound?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I agree.
Public health nurse, Amy, any idea on that?
Well, I believe they did a reorg a few years ago, and they eliminated the public health nurse. And now the demands with everything going on, she as directors, I think she needs more help. I think that's,
She's saying this is yes.
And it was,
I-
approved by the Personnel Board.
it
That
wasn't
makes it
through,
sound like-
it wasn't through a cut, it was through a reorg. So I'm not sure what you would consider that one.
Conservation agent, I will check with DPW Director Lynch. Where are we? Maintenance assistant, again, that's consolidated facilities, so
new.
it may have been in a schools-type capacity, and maybe restoring an old schools position. Library assistant, I'll say that's a restoration, that's.
Thank you.
I think that's it, right? Another reference librarian in Tier 2, that lieutenant in the fire department. Chief mentioned
That's a
that's the
training-
training
that's a
officer. That's the
training guy.
training.
So I just want to point out a scenario to folks. If the warrant committee wanted to get the number down to about $3.5 million, and I'm making a big assumption here, and you wanted to split those tier 1 cuts pretty much equally between the schools and the non-school departments, let's say you were going to apply the same, let's say you were going to try to fund both departments equally under tier 1. If you cut up from the bottom of the schools list about $225,000, you would lose a sped teacher in transitions, the additional sped staff in grades 5 co-taught classes, and then the $100,000 for professional development. That gets you to $225,000. To find a similar amount of money in this prioritization, I've highlighted all of the ones that you would have to eliminate. If you're moving from the bottom up, that gets you about $228,000. So you're not getting the parks.
Number you mentioned.
You're not getting the parks laborer. You're not getting the additional help in the Board of Health, which I think is unfortunate. This DPW conservation agent, all of this funding for forestry, et cetera, and then the second position at the library. If you make all of those cuts, you get to an override of about $3.5 million. I just wanted to give people something to think about for the next couple of days, what it would take to get that number down. Yes.
And then the schools can do whatever, they have a bottom line budget, they're just a number.
They're just the number, but they did do the exercise
They
of
did,
voting this.
But things
and
change and they could.
They do change, but they did say that, this is that this is their intent.
Yep.
Yes, Steve.
Mike, it's been a while since House 1 came out. Has Rep. Driscoll had any insights to where they're going with the?
No words yet, no. I did hear that the Chapter 90 money is not going to be the $300 million statewide that it was 2 years ago. When Governor Baker was first elected, it's going to go back to that $200 million number, which, that's another $300,000 for Joe Lynch and his crew to do some more roads. But no, I haven't heard anything from Rep. Driscoll yet.
Okay. And one other question.
Yes.
The potential for impact on, of the snow budget to reduce what we have available for free cash next year, if we've got to pay that down somewhat. So if we, I know it may snow Friday night, but if we could kind of figure out where we are as deficit-wise as of now.
So we did do that, we did it, it's ironically, both in FY16 and FY17, it's a $150,000 appropriation. FY16, $355,000 spent, FY17, $356,000 spent to date, so.
So we gotta come up with some way to cover that next year, which would seem to me to reduce free cash, whatever savings were there.
Yeah.
So any discussion of inching up that 150 to like 175 and work our way to a realistic number?
We had a preliminary discussion last night at the Board of Selectmen. Didn't resolve anything, but the same discussion that we just had here now. With the caution that I believe if you raise it to a number, it can't come back down.
Right.
But, I mean, to Tom Hurley's point, when you fill the salt shed in September, you're pretty much working through that 150 number.
So why is everyone so hesitant? I mean.
Because it's
it
the
is-
only line you can do that for.
I mean,
But there are other priorities. If you're trying to keep the amount of the potential override down, is that where, I mean, I know it was my idea, and I would like to solve that problem, but there's a lot of problems to be solved. So where does it land on the priority list? Because it does eat away at free cash every year and keeps us from doing other things, but it's going to cause us to not create some positions that we need if we were to throw another $100,000 at it this year.
So
I'm
when
not
did
saying
we-
100, I'm saying creep it up.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10.
Right.
Just, it doesn't
We
make sense
talked
to
about
me
it
that it's a 10-year
in
old.
Boston, it's a running 5-year average, right?
Yeah.
So you take a look at that, and, you know, that.
You have to take
should protect
2015
you.
out of that 5 years, because that was such a while.
That's why.
Yeah,
get
but you
5
have the
year
mild winters like,
last
you know,
This year and last
12,
year.
I think.
The last years. All right, so we're losing it a little bit. All right, so some more discussion on that. Phil?
One thing I'd like to ask the schools to do is to take another look at their priority list and make sure that they've identified all restorations in the sense that we have been using the term in discussing it. Some you've identified, but I want to make sure there aren't any more on there that are.
Thanks, Glenn. So very quickly, looking at the schedule, we're going to be back here on Monday night. We're going to hear from Blue Hills, and then we're going to finish up, hopefully, the Board of Selectmen sponsored articles. Katie, you're going to be able to be with us that night?
Yes.
Okay, I would also like, if you don't mind, to talk about the reserve fund transfer request quickly that night for the Board of Selectmen, for the TA position. And if we have time, we can take up the cemetery, but we can put that off a little bit longer. But since Katie's going to be here, I know some folks had some questions on that. And then we'll get back to this conversation about contingent.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor? Good night.
Thank you.
Mike.